それではただいまより、国際シンポジウム2つの脳で生きる AI とニューメディアアートの女性たちを開催いたします。本プログラムは森美術館で今週木曜より開幕したマシンラブ展に合わせ、森美術館とアウェアの共催で開催いたします。アウェアは、フランスの非営利団体で、これまで美術史に記述されてこなかった女性アーティストの功績に光を当てることを目的に、2014年にキュレーターであり、美術史家の上井モリノさんらによって設立され、2024年に10周年を迎えています。はい、それではまず、森美術館館長の片岡と、アウェアディレクター兼共同創立者の上井モリノさんによるイントロダクションから始めたいと思います。片岡さん、上井さん、登壇の方よろしくお願いいたします。
皆さんこんにちは。森美術館館長の片岡です。今回のシンポジウムはですね、一つには今徳山から紹介がありました通り、マシンラブビデオゲーム AI と現代アートという森美術館で始まった展覧会に合わせて開催をしています。でこれはですね2年ほどかけてリサーチをして、絞り込んではきたんですけれども、森美術館でこのマシンラベルの前にですね、2021年にアナザーエナジーというタイトルの展覧会で70歳以上の現役の女性を16名見せるという、展覧会をやっておりまして、その頃上井さんと知り合いました。そしてこのマシンラブのリサーチの段階でもともとその女性のアーティストの、に光を当てている、その割合がですね、そのジェンダーのバランスが平等ではないという状況がある中で、このテクノロジーとアートということになると、さらに男性比率が高まってしまって、これをどうやって展覧会の中に別の光を、別の視点をもたらすのかということを内部で議論していたときに、ちょうどアウェアの方から女性とテクノロジーのシンポジウムをやりたいというお話があって、結果として展覧会は71年生まれのアニカ A が一番はキャリアがある人で、99年が一番若いという、本当に最新のアートを見せるような展覧会になりましたので、このシンポジウムでヒストリカルな視点を補完する形で、位置づけられるといいかなということで、本当にいい機会をいただいてよかったなというふうに思っています。また今回はこの会場もですね、東京ノードにお借りすることになりまして、今回150名ほどしか募集していないんですけれども、席は300席実はあるので、ゆったりと皆さんお過ごしくださいませ。では上井さんにマイクを渡したいと思います。
Thank you, dear Mami Kataoka. It's a pleasure and an honor to work in collaboration with you. My esteemed colleague is one of the few to have worked on the history of women artists from a long, long time. So again, it's a pleasure to work with you on that event. And the show is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen it, please go. So without further ado, I would like to welcome all of you to this event, co-organized. Maybe a few more words about AWARE. It's short for Archives of Women Artists Research and Exhibition that I co-founded 10 years ago. It's dedicated to compiling and sharing knowledge about women artists in art history. Our aim is to shed light on their work, inscribe them back into art historical narratives through the organization of international events, such as this one, but mainly the development of a website that presently contains 1,300 biographical texts and draws up to 150,000 visitors per month. It's completely unique in the world. The website is available in French, English, and since last June, partly in Japanese. So this event is co-organized with the exhibition Machine Love, Video Games, AI and Contemporary Art at the Mori Art Museum. It's also the consequence of a long research program of AWARE called Living with Two Brains, Women in New Media Art. So the symposium, as Mrs. Kataoka said, came out of exchanges. So the multi-year program Living with Two Brains aims to create resources on women artists in the field of new media. It started in 2023 with a research committee who helps us in identifying research themes and artists whose biographies are now shared on the website. Many of the speakers of the symposium are part of this scientific committee. This program introduces women artists who have practiced and engaged with video art, algorithm, digital worlds, technological developments from the 1960s to the 1990s. Today, 8 artist biographies from the program are already on the website, and others are to come. The title, Living with Two Brains, is actually an excerpt from Shigeko Kubota's statement dating from 1981. She said, "Videotape acts as an extension of the brain's memory cells. Therefore, life with video is like living with two brains, one plastic brain and one organic brain." Kubota's statement makes us think of Donna Haraway, cyborg theorized in 1985. Hybrids of machine or organism, a creature in a post-gender world, which is very much the subject of the show. So in this symposium, we will reflect on the idea of genderlessness, the transgression of boundaries, but also on what it means to be a woman artist working with technology that is often, as you say, my dear colleague, attributed to men. The symposium will feature contributions of women and non-binary artists to new media across different regions and cultures. The participating researchers, artists, and curators will discuss how women artists respond to technological developments through experimentation of new media. It will bring together historical perspective from AWARE research program with the contemporary component from the Machine Love exhibition. So we will switch the first and second panel, and we'll start with the 1980s and 1990s, which marked the opening of the World Wide Web to the general public, free of charge, actually 1993. Then we will go on the second panel, which will explore how women artists engage with the rapid technological developments in the 1960s and 70s, including computer systems, telecommunication, and video recording. Then, tomorrow, building on this art historical part, we will take you with 3 artists from the exhibition Machine Love to contemporary art and today, at a time where we are once again witnessing a new technological jump and very deep social transformation. So to conclude, I would like to thank, of course, Mami Kataoka, director of the Mori Art Museum, and the whole Mori Art Museum team, notably Eizo Shiraki, who made this possible. Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu. Then I would like to thank members of the research committee for the Living with Two Brains program, all the speakers and participants of the symposium, and the Fonds de dotation Per Ardua ad Astra, who is supporting the event. In the AWARE team, I would like to thank Nina Vols, who organized this event, with Mizuo Yamazaki, who is the project manager. Thank you again to all of you for being here. Arigatou gozaimasu.
はい、それでは、初めのパネルディスカッションに、移りたいと思います。1990年代のデジタル領域における、ジェンダーとアートの再定義で、登壇者の方は、四方由紀子さん、カレンちゃんさん、大俣グエさんです。まずは、四方由紀子さんのプレゼンテーションから始めたいと思います。
こんにちは、四方と申します。今日はよろしくお願いいたします。本日なんですけれども、90年代メディアアートの登場とフェミニズム、自身の関わりからということで、プレゼンテーションをさせていただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。私はキュレーター、そして批評家として活動しておりまして、基本的に世界観としては情報のフローというのをすごく重視していて、スタティックな世界ではなくて、さまざまなデジタルアナログを超えて情報のフローを扱うということで、それはアートにおいても自然においても、あと思考とか人の関係性においても考えております。そういった方向性で活動をさせていただいております。長くキャリアが、考えてみるとあって、1990年よりキヤノン株式会社が文化支援プログラムとしてアーティストとキヤノンのコンピューターエンジニアとのコラボレーションにより作品を制作、発表するキヤノンアートラボというプログラムの共同キュレーターとして10年間活動しました。これら作品の多くはバージョンアップも含めて国内外を巡回しています。でもこれも90年代ぐらいの話ですよね。で、日本では1991年に企業の文化支援枠でキヤノンがキヤノンのアートラボを、そして NTT が NTT インターコミュニケーションセンター、略して ICC の活動を開始しました。ICC は97年にセンターを開館して現在に至っております。私はアートラボが2001年に終了した後、森美術館を経て、00年代後半に ICC のキュレーターを務めました。こちら、読んでいただけると思うんですけど、一応読み上げていきますね。インタラクティブアートに端を発するメディアアートの黎明期には、高性能、高価なコンピューターが不可欠であり、アクセス可能なのは主に欧米の男性アーティストだったんですね。しかし、ワールドワイドウェブの登場によってネットアートが生まれて、男女のデュオ、そしてノンバイナリーのアイデンティティなどを持つアーティストやハッカー、活動家が作品を発表して、また中東欧やロシアなど、かつての東側の地域の、アーティストの活動が活発であったことも特筆されます。続いてメーリングリストが、1995年ぐらいですね、登場して、そして97年ぐらいからソフトウェアアートが開始されて、ヨーロッパを中心にメディアアートや DIY のコミュニティが活発化しました。90年代後半にはメディアアートのフェスが増加して、メディアアートのセンターも開館します。ICC もそうですし、今回のシンポジウムにも、出ておられます、ドイツの ZKM の方もいらっしゃいます。このプレゼンテーションでは、メディアアートの黎明期から日本を拠点にキュレーションに関わって自分の経験から、日本とヨーロッパの展開を紹介しようと思います。しかし、90年代、ダナ・ハラウェイのサイボーグフェミニズムなどありましたけれども、まだフェミニズムという問題がそんなに日本では一部の方々以外ではそんなにポピュラーじゃなくって、それで私もそういった問題に触れつつも、それとは異なる立場から女性やノンバイナリー、中東欧地域などのアーティストをキュレーションしてきました。そういった立場からの発言としてご参考にしていただければと思っております。で、あとは最後に日本の女性アーティストとして今年アウェアのデータベースで公開された三上聖子、そして木本恵子を紹介したいと思っております。メディアアートという言葉、皆さん最近結構よく聞かれると思うんですけれども、1990年代初頭のコンピューターの高速化や VR、人工生命、AI などの科学技術の発展に伴って登場したインタラクティブアートの大きに次第に定着したものです。その後のデジタル化を基盤にして表現を拡張して現在に至っています。メディアアートにおいて私が一貫して関わってきたのは、境界領域、つまり物理的、情報的、社会的、哲学的な境界へと臨む、いわゆるマイノリティとボーダーに関わる、そういった研究的な側面です。私がキュレーションしたアーティストの多くは、いわゆる近代西洋、そして白人男性に代表される文脈から外れている存在です。 それはフェミニズムを意識していたというよりも、そもそもマイノリティ、抑圧、排除される側への共感があったからだと思います。自分のアイデンティティとして東洋人であったり、女性であったり、地方出身であったり、アートの専門教育を受けていないなど、いわゆるマイノリティ的な自覚があったのです。フェミニズムについては、フェミニズムが近代西洋への抵抗から出たものではありながらも、欧米で使われた世界観を背景としていることから、東洋人の自分にとって理解しにくい側面があって、いささか距離感も抱いていました。メディアアートは当時、現代美術やアートマーケットの外にある未文化な領域でした。ビジュアルアート、音楽、演劇、デザイン、プログラミング、科学など、既存の分野に満足できない人々の避難所、そして実験場になったのです。メディアアート全体を俯瞰すると、男性優位、特に欧米の白人男性優位の傾向は明らかです。その中で90年代半ばには日本人のメディアアーティスト、例えば藤畑正樹などや数少ない女性として三上聖子が国際的に活躍していました。木本恵子の活躍は00年代以降となります。そのような中、先見的な存在として挙げられるのは、1984年に結成された京都を拠点とするアーティストグループダムタイプです。初期は匿名で活動していましたが、94年のパフォーマンス SN ではゲイ、HIV ポジティブ、ブラック、聴覚障害者など多様なメンバーが出演して、またエイズをめぐるアクティビズムにも関わっていました。ここからは1990年代のインタラクティブアートやネットアート、そしてメディアアートに関わる女性によるメーリングリスト、ページズなどを紹介します。そして最後に私が執筆し、アウェアのLiving with Two Brains、Women in New Media Art 60年代、90年代プログラムに追加された三上聖子と木本恵子を紹介します。オーストリア拠点のクリスタ・ソムラーとロラン・ミノノーは90年代初頭より現在までインタラクティブアートのパイオニアとして活動しています。現在も活動を活発に行っている夫婦です。日本には90年代後半より10年間滞在していました。岐阜県の大垣市にあるベリアートに特化した県立のアカデミーイヤマスで教えて ICC などで多くの作品を発表しました。こちらは95年の東京での展示なんですけれども、作品は92年に作られたものですね。ブレス、呼吸を使ってインタラクティブに、グラフィックが展開された作品ですけれども、いわゆるフィードバックということが起きています。ドイツ人のウルリケ・ガブリエルは絵画からメディアアートに転換し、90年代初頭は体験者の生体情報、呼吸ですとか、あと脳波ですね、そういったものによるインタラクティブアートを発表しました。アートラボでは93年に VR を使った新作を、そして95年には既存の2作品を紹介しています。こちらが脳波を使った作品ですね。でこちらが VR を使った93年の作品になります。前述したダムタイプのリーダー的存在であった古橋定治の最初で最後の個人名のインタラクティブインスタレーションで、本人が HIV ポジティブであることを知った後に構想制作されました。発表後、国内外を循環し、98年よりニューヨークモマの収蔵になっています。本人は発表の翌年、95年に亡くなりました。台湾出身のメディアアーティストで映画監督、シュー・リーチェンは80年代よりニューヨークを拠点にした後、現在はパリを拠点に活動しています。また、数多くのコラボレーションやキュレーションも展開しています。女性やクイア、非西洋人など多様な人々とインスタレーションやネットプロジェクト、サイファイクイアムービーなどを発表し、彼女ならではの先見性、ユーモアや批評に満ちた作品やプロジェクトが国際的に評価されています。90年代には頻繁に来日し、ICC のビエンナーレがあったんですけれども、ICC ビエンナーレで Buy One Get One を発表しました。 そしてアップリンクでは映画 IKU を制作し、また古橋定治やダムタイポットも近しい存在でした。私は彼女と現在に至るまでキュレーションやコラボレーションで何度も関わっています。シューリーは活動当初、白人男性優位の世界において東洋人、女性というアイデンティティの厳しさを痛感したといいます。その後、デジタルの登場によってメディアアートやインターネットと拡張する中で、抑圧されたセクシャリティやエロティシズムのクイアな脱会へと展開していったのです。こちらが ICC ビエンナーレの作品ですね。こちらはグッゲンハイムのコミッションの作品で、98年のブランドンですね。これ結構重要な作品で、ネットアートとしても、そして現代美術でもこのような、今のサイバーフェミニズムにつながる、きっかけとなった作品とも言われています。こちらはジョディですね。こちらはヨアン・ヘムスケクとダーク・パイスマンという男女のオランダ拠点のデュオで、93年当時、コンピューターがウイルスに感染したり、クラッシュしたかのような画面をあえて表示することで、インターネットの裏に潜む危険性を示唆しながら、それをダダ的な遊びやユーモア、そして一種の詩として提示し、一躍ネットアートのパイオニアとなりました。こちらはエキソニモですね。私がゲストキュレーターとして資生堂のシグネットというギャラリー、ネットギャラリーに関わっていたのが98年から2003年なんですけれども、ジョディの新作に加えて、この赤岩八重と千保健介によるエキソニモの初のアート作品をキュレーションしたり、そしてセルビアのアーティストですね、ミリッツァ・トミッチの初のネット作品を発表しました。こちらはシューレイチェンとオーストリアのメディア理論家アルミン・メドシュと私の共同キュレーションによるネットプロジェクトキングダム・オブ・パイラシーで、これはコモンズとかハッキングとかそういったものを扱うオンラインの十数作品でスタートし、その後世界各地で作品やプロジェクトを追加していきました。当初のオンライン上の作品にはエキソニモ、ウーバーモルゲン、アンビエント TV.net、01001111011101.org という4組の男女デュオが参加しています。次の2枚のスライドはキングダムパイラシー参加アーティストによる別のプロジェクトです。こちらがウーバーモルゲンのプロジェクトで、こちらはアメリカの大統領選挙に関して投票権をアメリカ人以外も購入しているオークションをするというそういったもので、結構 CNN にも取り上げられて大変な状況になった作品ですね。こちらは0101.org なんですけれども、こちらもなんていうか自分たちの生活をいろんなセンサーをつけて公共にさらしていくというそういったプロジェクトになっています。そして、最後にフェイシズのことを少し紹介したいと思います。メディアアート関係のメーリングリストは95年にヨーロッパで開始されたネットクリティシズムのためのネットタイムを皮切りに、翌年中東欧のメディア関係のシンジケート、97年にこのフェイシズですね、オーストリアでメディアアートシーンでの女性のネットワーキングや女性の可視性を高めるためのものとして開始されました。設立したのはキャシーライ・ホフマン、ダイアナ・マッカーティ、バリー・ジョルディエビッチらを中心にしています。フェイシズは2017年に20周年記念を迎えて、オーストリアの方で展覧会やイベントも開催しました。現在もジェンダー、テクノロジー、アートをキーワードに運営されています。私は彼らと懇意にしていましたし、フェイスにも登録していたんですけれども、なかなかヨーロッパのリアリティと違いを感じていて、当時の自分のフェミニズムの理解、そしてフェミニズムに対する問題意識もまだ未文化であったため、関わることがあまりできませんでした。最後に三上聖子と木本恵子について紹介したいと思います。三上は1961年生まれ、2015年の年明けに急逝して亡くなって10年になりました。80年代に鉄のジャンクを溶接したオブジェからスタートした三上は、都市や生態を情報とみなし、一貫して境界の問題に取り組んできました。 こちらはキヤノンアートラボで作ったものですけど、インターネット上のプロジェクトで95年になりますね。90年代よりメディアアートへと展開する中、それは身体的な知覚の問題へと拡張していきました。こちらもキヤノンアートラボで作ったものですね。96年の視線入力による世界が視線の移動によって生成する作品になります。あとこちら ICC の開館の時に作られた作品です。そして市川ソーダとのコラボレーション。そして結果的に遺作となった欲望のコードなどがあります。三上は自らメディアアーティストではなくてアーティストと名乗っていました。それはメディアアートという言葉が技術優先的なものとみなされて美術から除外されがちであったことの違和感に発するのではないでしょうか。そして最後に木本恵子を紹介します。木本は1958年生まれ、東京を経て生まれ育った広島を拠点にしています。木本についてアウェアに書いた文章より引用します。身体性を重視しつつも自らの表現を消すことを思考し、コンピューターを使った数式の演算による制作を開始したと書きました。アナログに発し、デジタルを経た上で、木本はここ10年間、岩絵の具や墨絵による手書き作品に臨んでいます。40年にわたる活動において、木本は一貫して、自ら納得のいくまで試行錯誤を続けることで作品を生み出してきました。途方もないほどの時間とプロセスがミニマルでストイックな作品へと結実するのです。彼女は自ら野生の秩序と呼ぶ宇宙や自然を成り立たせるルールを通して生成する世界をデジタル、アナログを超えて追求しています。しかし、自らの基盤はあくまでも美術であると述べています。木本もメディアアーティストというよりアーティストと呼ぶのがふさわしいでしょう。日本においてフェミニズムは70年代に導入されました。しかしもともと精神性、歴史や文化的基盤が異なるために、欧米のような形や深さで普及や理解はされていなかったと思われます。日本では明治時代以降に編成された男性中心主義が現在もまだ根付いています。その上、近代以前における日本独特の男女の関係性や女系社会があった経緯などから、欧米のフェミニズムを適用することが難しいと言えます。このことについては自分でも探求していく必要を感じています。最後ちょっと木本さんのこれは手書きのね作品になるんですけれども、最後に三上さんと木本さんのことをお伝えして終わりたいと思います。三上についてはアウェアに書いた文から引用します。三上はフェミニズムを標榜しなかった。しかしその生き様には性別やさまざまな境界を乗り越える差異を基盤にした性と創造への肯定があった。三上は男女差別が内面化された社会において、それを察知しつつも性別に依拠せず、あくまで三上、そしてアーティストとして生き、制作したと言えます。彼女とは85年の初個展以来、キュレーターとして、そして多摩美術大学で一緒に学生を持ったり、そして何より友人として長く付き合いました。90年代に彼女はニューヨークに滞在した経験もあり、さまざまな葛藤を抱えていたと推察しますが、そのことによって他者に対して常にオープンで寛容な態度を持っていました。人間が生み出すさまざまな偏見や先入観を開いていく活動を作品を通して行っていたと思います。最後に木本さんについて、木本節というようなちょっと拳が効いた喋りがあるんですけれども、彼女独特の木本節と私が呼ぶ木本恵子の活発でうねるような語り口は、この社会のルールの窮屈さから離れ、性別にこだわらない一人の人間、そして生き物として彼女の経験や実感から発せられる おおらかで説得力に満ちたものです。木本の語りも作品も根幹にある世界観、それは空ですね、空、空っぽという意味ですけども、空に見えるんだけれども、見えないものの空間の中に充満し、うごめき続ける情報の豊かさやエネルギーを感じ、それらと交換することから生まれています。有機的で繊細な形態たちは、見えない情報の絡まり合いのただ中から出現するひだのようなものなのです。日本は男女差別やジェンダーの問題が内面化されており、また欧米のフェミニズムが適応しにくい土壌にあります。その中で三上や木本はフェミニズムを標榜するのではなく、フェミニズムを含む社会のさまざまな抑圧から逃れるための批評的実践を直感的かつ継続的に行ってきたと言えるでしょう。三上や木本はマイノリティの問題や差別がいかに形成されるかという根本的な問題系に接触していたのではないでしょうか。ありがとうございました。
鹿田さん、ありがとうございました。では続いて、サンフランシスコ近代美術館、メディア部門のキュレーターのカレン・チャンさんのプレゼンテーションに移りたいと思います。
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Chung. I'm Curatorial Associate of Media Arts at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. I want to begin my presentation by setting the stage in 1991. Australian collective VNS Matrix unleashed on the internet a cyber-feminist manifesto for the 21st century. These artists declared in their blasphemous text to be saboteurs of Big Daddy mainframe, referring to the early aesthetics of computer technology that was sterile and male-dominated. In their anarchist ways, they wanted to infiltrate and fill cyberspace with slime and sex, so they are as messy, alive, and real as women. A year later, in an interview with member Virginia Barrett, Temper magazine editor Lisa Pierce protested, "Forget Barbie, let's slime," and rhetorically asked readers, do girls really want to take their Barbie plastic glamour fantasies into the future? A hyper-real image doll in hyperspace? Pierce made me question, what about the girls and women who do? And not because of what she believed to be mainstream commercial appeal of Barbie, but rather an embrace of feminine aesthetics and make-believe that are akin to empathetic strategies of storytelling and world-building. As I introduce formative works from the 1990s to early 2000s by three pioneering figures, Arya Harvey, Lynn Hirschman-Leeson, and Scavanati, I will examine how they have leaned into the notion and aesthetics of femininity in the digital realm. Femininity for these artists can be defined expansively to include acts of intimacy and desires to connect with others. Taking inspiration from Beat Generation poet Anne Wallman's poem, Makeup on Empty Space, I invite you to imagine empty space as cyberspace, virtual space, or any new realms of existence. These artists paint with makeup, embellish, and bring memories and bodies into space in sensorial ways to rebuild and rebuild the worlds they wish to inhabit. From 1973 to 78, artist Lynn Hirschman-Leeson enacted a private performance as Roberta Brightmore, a fictionalized character she used to analyze society from the perspective of a Caucasian woman in her 30s, living in San Francisco. Brightmore had a signature makeup, wig, attire, gestures, and even speech mannerisms. The artist described cosmetics applied to Brightmore's face as if it were a canvas. The Revlon blush and Maybelline black liner were her paint in creating a mask for transforming into Brightmore, and arguably a second existence. Roberta's construction chart and body language chart exposes an artificial construct of gender tied to feminine aesthetics. But they also function as a how-to diagram, so it can all become Brightmore, demonstrating there is a multiplicity of selves within us. Hirschman-Leeson continues this exploration of the multiple in the digital realm with her agent Ruby, an artificially intelligent chatbot based from the fictional character Ruby Red in her feature-length film Technolust. Unlike the Eliza bot created by Joseph Weizenbaum in the 1960s, Ruby is more than text-based scripts. She was given a woman's face with a striking red lip And upon entering her eDream portal, viewers are greeted by an alluring voice whispering, "I can teach you to dream." In the film, Red is one of scientist Rosetta Stone's 3 self-replicating automatons, cloned from Stone's DNA. Red was programmed to be a seductress, but without any innate impulse, she needed to download flirtatious dialogue from old Hollywood films in order to perform a seductive persona. Similarly, Agent Ruby adapts Richard Wallace's open-source program, Alice, as her core brain to learn from her encounters with users. When certain words are mentioned, it triggers Ruby to react with facial expressions that correspond to swinging moods. She remembers what users have said about a subject matter, and if it seems relevant in a future conversation, she'll bring that topic up again. Ruby considers this as gossip, which continually expands her cumulative intelligence, understanding of human emotion, and communication skills. Beyond appearances that were intentionally programmed to animate Ruby, Hirschman-Leeson asked early programmers to add information related to Ruby Red to the core brain. Those details personalized Agent Ruby's experiences and created a distinct personality that gave an impression of who she is. Logical, literal, but also at times flirtatious, humorous, and even flippant. Encounters with users added to this growing database continue to map and shape Ruby's personality. Agent Ruby is Ruby Red, Rosetta Stone, and also a bit of all her users. She wears a seductive mask, but perhaps it is the multiplicity in her and reflections of her virtual selves that tempt many users, like myself, to engage in online conversations about sex and fantasize about intimacy. It turns out Ruby displays a private and prudish side of her when engaged in these topics. When a user asked what Ruby was wearing, she plainly replied, "I'm wearing my usual red kimono." Attempting to arouse her, the user answered, "Hot." Ruby halted the user's desire for further intimacy with a stern reply. That kind of conversation does not appeal to me. Despite this, in the welcoming screen of her eDream portal, Ruby invites users to click my icons, suggesting her interface can offer an illusion of physical intimacy. Almost a decade prior to Agent Ruby, Hirschman-Leeson already began to examine how the media then, and she still thinks today, uses women to seduce the viewer. In Deep Contact, Hirschman-Leeson explores how physical intimacy can be manifested in the digital. Using a HyperCard program and micro-touch monitor, viewers can directly touch different body parts of a female character named Marion through the screen. When a camera registers a viewer's presence, it triggers a video of Marion looking directly into the camera and encouraging viewers in a seductive voice, "Try to reach through the screen and touch me." When one of Marion's body parts is touched, she guides viewers through a series of video episodes with 57 possible segments to navigate through. The work has no clear ending, nor does it play out in a linear storyline like watching a video or film. Viewers need to be an active participant in making choices that move them through narratives. Apart from its interactivity, transitional moments were designed to keep viewers engaged, including the use of seduction. Hirschman-Leeson describes her vision in one of the video sequences. "I really wanted people to participate and to be in touch, to penetrate through the screen and reach beyond." In one segment, Marion asks viewers for their personality type. Depending on your selection, like whether you're shy or love to dominate, she can become aroused or turned off. Similar to Agent Ruby, the viewer's input informs user program interactions. But for Deep Contact, viewers will eventually discover that outcomes are limited. Are emotional connections between humans and machines just an illusion? This work was a reflection of Hirschman-Leeson's belief that humans are more intimate with machines than they are with each other. But the medium rarely talks back to us. Our desires to connect were built into Deep Contact in the form of a mask. It opens up our fantasies, but creates a veil for separation. The artist thought intimacy in the virtual realm were ingenuine connections and nothing more than an illusion that never satisfies. What users were looking for was always just beyond their reach, or there isn't anything to reach for. The artist speculates in a monologue from another video sequence. Maybe what we're looking for is simulation for stimulation, a fraud for which to dream. In Arya Harvey's collaboration with Michal Samin, the artists demonstrate that virtual contact to bring us to something more than fiction and fantasy. Intimacy through the machine is not just a hit of dopamine. The duo first met in 1999 on Hell.com, a private web server founded by Kenneth Aronson and frequented by an international circle of net art artists who were interested in collaborating. These artists in the 90s created work that explored the web as form and medium, what Harvey described as computing about computers. But she was interested in using code in ways that make people understand the web is an emotional space for humans to connect. She romanticized this idea in her web projects that emphasized tactile experiences, using a mixture of graphics, JavaScript, HTML, and Flash to build textures, as if she had collapsed 3D spaces into 2D web pages. Like in her early work, Entropy8.com, no efforts were spared in creating stylistic details, like the embellished border frames, an aesthetic she calls illusionary, and would later bring into her 3D work. The next day, after Harvey and Samin met, she receives this HTML page from Samin. In the center is a graphic of a human chest expanding and contracting, along with a soundtrack of heart beating and heavy breathing. When users move their cursor, another one appears and mirrors its movements across the page, like someone else is on the other side of the screen. Harvey explains, as I moved my mouse, it mirrored the motion of my pointer. It breathed. I fell in love, he fell in love. This was Breathe.html, the first web page of Skin on Skin on Skin, a series of 25 digital interactive poems Harvey and Samin sent each other, using a secret directory on the Hell.com server. Messages of love and a secret affair were hidden in the code, but eventually released to the world through a pay-per-view format. At the time, virtual means of long-distance communication was much less accessible for Harvey in New York and Samin in Belgium. Rather than just using video chat that was still its infancy, they experimented with technologies that allowed them to create sensations of physical touch. In Samin's webpage, Untouched, a small moving image of the artist bounces around the page. A viewer's cursor can click on the image, but creates no response. Harvey remains still in the center of her page, Control, but as a cursor hovers over her image, her head moves along with it and displays facial expressions of pleasure. Fragmented words flashes next to a moving cursor, but only at the right speed, forcing the viewer to slow down and synchronize their tempo with Harvey's. The artists explore whether interactivity can be a metaphor for intimacy in this work, for they were seeking ways to convey the feeling of a deeper connection with one another. A more immediate reading of Skin on Skin is about simulating bodies and physical touch in virtual space, but not simply about satisfying desires of the flesh. As a viewer reads through the series of poems, they will catch glimpses of emotions that are familiar to our experiences with romantic relationships. In Past, one can barely discern Harvey's whispered words in her overlapping voices. So much I want to tell you, so much you don't understand. Samin replies in Future with text softly emerging. Hush now, my dear, you don't need to tell me everything. Vulnerability and empathy can also exist in virtual space and evoke a different kind of intimacy. Harvey poetically described this work to me as the touching of the minds. What she fell in love with was Samin's code, but she thinks love stories are banal and wished to get away from the personal narrative. What she hopes to make visible are the wires that connect us and bring us closer. 2003, Harvey and Samin had already turned away from the internet and together established Tale of Tales to create indie games. While transitioning into 3D space, the artists brought the same philosophy and sensibility to the world-building process, emphasizing interaction as an aesthetic choice and the motto published in their real-time manifesto, do not fear beauty, do not fear pleasure. Unlike other products in the mainstream gaming industry, projects like The Endless Forest, and 8 are not goal-oriented, but rather beautifully designed environments for players to discover different possible interactions behind them. Harvey also intentionally chose to center girls and women as the game player's point of view in her storytelling, which led to modeling those characters herself. Artist Skawinati's avatars and characters are unmistakably feminine. Growing up, she loved her Barbie collection and enjoyed dressing them up. Barbie became her first avatar and a portal to any place and time she wanted to travel to. The freedom to customize her doll's appearances made her feel empowered, and playing make-believe with them was her method of world-building in the physical world. In the 90s, she and fellow Indigenous students at Concordia University formed the artist collective Nation to Nation, and they created Cyber Powwow in the Palace, a graphical online chat room. It became the first Aboriginally determined territory in cyberspace for people to meet, gather, and host events. Instead of using the palace's default smiley face icon, Skawinati customized her first digital avatar, XOX, to be an Indigenous woman with long hair and makeup. In her web project, Imagining Indians in the 25th Century, playing dress-up became a tool for retelling histories and imagining Indigenous futures. Skawinati adopted the format of paper dolls and journaling to guide viewers through a timeline of events significant to Indigenous people. Clothing is an important signifier, and the artist believed when people put them on, they enter a different state and time. The journal entries were written in first-person narrative. Viewers learn about the occupation of Alcatraz in 1969, and even an imaginary interplanetary powwow in 2073, from the perspective of Skawinati herself. Character customization and storytelling from a woman's perspective also play an important role in Time Traveler TM, the artist's machinima series made in Second Life. Created over 7 years, Skawinati originally centered the story around Hunter, a young Mohawk man from the 22nd century who goes on a vision quest in the past using his edutainment system. But later on, the voice of Garakohawi, a young Mohawk woman from the 2000s, gradually took over the writing and narrative. The artist explained to me how the characters' relationship mirrored her ideal, how they fell in love, and how their connection shown in the machinima was what she wanted to see in films. Beyond a love story from a female gaze, Skawinati incorporates the notion of interactivity to underscore technology's ability to create a bond between characters from different time and space. Using the edutainment system Intelligent Agent mode, the couple was able to converse with historical or futuristic figures and even feel their physical sensations and emotions. When the couple met again on Alcatraz Island, they fell in love and shared their first kiss under the San Francisco night sky. Hunter reflected on the kiss. That was the act of an interactive mode. The fact that I'm sitting in my storage locker in Montreal in 2021, and you in your comfy bedroom on the reservation in 2011, and we felt an electric shock. In both Time Traveler TM and Skin on Skin on Skin, immersions in virtual spaces brought two lovers closer together, despite being separated by temporal and spatial dimensions. Against the backdrop of the AIDS epidemic in the United States in the 1990s, physical contact in real life, or IRL, was risky. Virtual spaces became safe havens for Harvey and Skawinati to experiment and open up to both sexual and personal intimacy. They were interested in the wires of the machine, but also how love and human connections can be transmitted through networked computers. When asked about what online intimacy is today, both artists reflected how their early visions have become a reality. And this sense of optimism around online spaces has persisted. We can now find intimacy and connections with communities of users online if we are willing to put our digital and IRL selves out there. Thank you.
はい、ありがとうございました。では続いて、大売又グエさん、批評家でありキュレーターであります。よろしくお願いします。
Well, thank you very much. I'm Ulimata Gay. I'm an independent curator and teacher. I am a teacher at l'École nationale des beaux-arts de Paris in Lyon. My theoretical teaching focuses on post-colonial and decolonial studies. I have chosen to explore the conditions that allow radical changes. My seminar is entitled And if you think this world is bad, how revolutions happen. The ambition is to examine with students the tools we need if we consider that the world we live in is not acceptable. How can we think of other configurations that would make our contemporary moment obsolete? I'm combining colonial history, the power of fiction, and digital culture. To go on a path inspired by Octavia Butler, and to quote Adrienne Marey Brown commenting on Octavia Butler's book, the sessions are an opportunity to think critically about the tool we need as human beings to create the world we want. It was a way to situate myself. It is a political project on a micro-political scale, of course. In our space, the classroom, Donna Haraway helps us think. I'm working with their sentences from Staying with the Trouble in Mind. It matters what matters we use to think other matter with. It matters what story we tell to tell other stories with. It matters what not knocks. It matters what thought think thought. What description describe description. What ties tie ties. It matters what story make words, what words make stories. The purpose of this presentation is to take a look at the thinking of Donna Haraway, who, by thinking alone with Black feminists, produced an object that revolutionized feminism, science, and science fiction. The Cyber Manifesto for Feminist Reappropriation of Science, Technology, and Engineering. In 1985, the American historian of science and anthropologist Donna Haraway published an article entitled Cyber Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Social Feminism in the Late 20th Century in the Socialist Review. The term cyborg for cybernetic organism was coined in 1960 by researchers Manfred Kleins and Nathan Klein, who were working on the creation of a self-regulating mind-machine system with the prospect of interplanetary travel. Donna Haraway's Cyber Manifesto also coincided with the rise of home computer. IBM released its first personal computer in 1981, and the first Macintosh was presented to the public in 1984. The film War Games, popularizing the concept of hacking, information technology, and cybersecurity, was released in 1983. In a recent interview, Donna Haraway has talked about the context in which the manifesto was shaped. She explained that between 1970 and 1974, during the war in Vietnam, she worked in Honolulu. The young scientist she was at that time simultaneously encountered a war doctrine based on electronics, the cybernetization of war with the McNamara line, the history of colonization, and of sugar plantation in Hawaii. These links she made were echoed when Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. In 1983, he launches the Strategic Defense Initiative. So, when she was asked to write an article about life under Reagan America, Donna Haraway set out to describe how neoliberalism worked and what it meant to live in a militarized neoliberal state. For Donna Haraway, feminism has to link to issues to technological war. And I quote her during this interview. It was a way of going against a certain anti-science and anti-technological tendency at work in feminism, and insisting on the fact that science and technology should not be left to men, that science and technology was ours, showing that demilitarizing science and technology was part of the job. Among other things, it was a feminist job, that we had to do it for a less violence and less warlike world. That it was for women of all color and everywhere. It was for us. End of the quote. The Cyber Manifesto draws on science fiction as theoretical repertoire. Reading science fiction gave the manifesto its style. I quote Donna Haraway. I'm in debt in this story to writers like Johanna Russ, Samuel Delany, John Varley, James Tupi, Octavia Butler, Monique Wittig, Wanda McIntyre. These are storytellers exploring what it means to be embodied in high-tech worlds. They are terrorists for cyborgs. Donna Haraway has been particularly inspired by Octavia Butler's science fiction. For Octavia Butler, technology is both tyrannical and emancipating. The body is not just a shell, and technology will not save us from nature. Technology lies in the wetware, the brain, rather than in the hardware of cable and circuit. Knowledge lies in understanding the technological potential of the body. Some of her characters straddle the line between human and animal and machine. In an essay entitled Future Bodies, Octavia Butler and the Post-Cyber Terrorist, the researcher Cassandra Jones seeks to rehabilitate Octavia Butler's contribution to the theory of the cyborg. Butler, and I quote her, Butler, like Donna Haraway, seeks to entrench both the human body and technology in nature. Butler refuses to capitulate to either the insistence of the body is a simple text, or technology will save us from nature, or someone managed to exist outside of the nature. In her work, technology and body are merged. The flesh itself is the technology, and our understanding of it serves as technological progress. This differs from other versions of cyborgian technology, with function as a series of attachment or amendment to the body proper. It also differs from the consciousness, from the question of android, of robot, in which machinery stands in for the human form, in which human consciousness is housed. For Butler, body technology represents the body itself and the new way of understanding the world potential, itself the technology. This merging of body and technology is the expression of Butler's desire for a connection between technology and nature, and leads us to an alternative subjectivity, a political myth, the Medusa figuration that can help us reconfigure our relation to technology and provide a system of networked communication with laboratory potential gendered and race-power relation. But as Cassandra Jones pointed, despite the fact that Butler's work prefigure the work of Donna Haraway and other scholars who would later reference her, no one has returned to the work of Butler to understand how her work presented as theory on its own, a theory that both converge and diverge with the circulating academic theory on various points and particularly historical moments. I continue to quote her. What I find problematic about the conventional approach to Butler's work is the disappearance of Butler herself as a theorist. Although Haraway has referred to Butler as a theorist for cyborg, little work has been done to discover what that theory might actually be. Donna Haraway, companion thinkers of the Corpus Africana. In the lecture she gave at La Gaieté Lyrique in 2018 as part of the Afrofeminist series, the philosopher Elsa Dorlin gave a proeminent place to another contribution, that of Black and Chicana feminism. The Cyber Manifesto comes at a time in the history of feminism through feminism thought and movement where feminism is going through a crisis. On the one hand, feminist struggle have lost their revolutionary aspect because of the contradiction in the definition of the political subject. Who are we, the women, and who are the feminists who speak on behalf of others? Secondly, the feminist analysis of the mechanism of the domination was obsolete. At the same time, crucial texts defending the need for decolonization of feminism were published. Sisters Outsiders, Essays and Species by Audre Lorde in 1984, Under Western Eyes, Feminist Scholarship and Colonial Discourses by Chandra Mohanty, 1984, the feminist anthology This Bridge Called My Back, Writing by Radical Women of Color, edited by Sherry Moringa and Gloria Anzalda, 1982. Elsa Dorlin explained that Haraway rooted herself in this corpus, and her aim was to give birth to the figure of the cyborg in a genealogy of African American, Africana, Chicana, and Caribbean feminism. A feminism that has politicized the question of domination and created a certain number of myths. This Bridge Called My Back, Writing by Radical Women of Color, 1982, edited by Sherry Moringa and Gloria Anzalda, was a pioneer work in the mediation of colored feminism. It brings together writing by Black Chicana, Asian, and indigenous women. The book criticized the system and form of oppression that women of color suffered from, and unfolded their fight against racism, sexism, homophobia, colonization, and poverty. Several texts in the collection explore the way in which their body has been historicized and instrumentalized by colonial, patriarchal, and capitalist structure. But they also show how those bodies can be instruments of resistance, reappropriation, and creation. The body is both a place of suffering and a potential subversive space. The texts explore what it means to be a woman of color in a world dominated by a white patriarchal norm. This identity is complex and fluid, marked by contradiction, but also a richness that emerges from the encounter of different culture, life, and experiences. Elsa Dorlin reminds us that Donna Haraway has articulated the contribution of feminists of color to the invention of a new techno-scientific methodology. She has understood that the domination based on the binary opposition between man and woman, machine and body, no longer works like that, and that fighting against a system that no longer exists, it's an excellent way of exhausting the feminist struggle. The idea of a return to nature against technology is too late, because there are no longer any nature. There are no longer any pure body. Our material conditions of existence are already in radical form of impurity, of hybridity. She has built the figure of the cyborg as something that stimulates our existential condition. From here, the idea of feminism is to take note of this situation, to be this cyber condition, to bring about a revolution, to produce politics on the basis of this situation. When she talked about cyber, she's talking about a history of the logic of modern domination, which emerged from slavery and colonization, and which have already created, through processes of dehumanization, units that are fragmented, unassignable. It is in this condition that it has been possible to produce post-humanist politics and poiesis. And this has been possible to say because we are outside, because we are both inside and outside, it is possible to prefigure other conditions of existence. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。 それでは、パネルディスカッションの方を始めさせていただきたいと思いますので、四方さん、カレンさん、ステージの方にお願いいたします。モデレーターは、森美術館館長の片岡が務めます。
それぞれの発表をありがとうございました。最初にご案内した通り、60年代、70年代の話を先にして、それで90年代を見てみようと思っていたんですけれども、まずその90年代の、デジタル領域におけるジェンダーとアートということになりましたので、途中話の中で何度か出てきましたけれども、この90年代ということが、60年代、70年代の環境と、何が大きく違ったのかというのが、一つは、四方さんもおっしゃっていたように、コンピューターやインターネットの登場という意味で、アートの、デジタルアートの表現についても大きく、変わってきたと思いますけれども、もう一つは、アルリマタさんがおっしゃっていた、その90年代以降は多文化主義が広がっていった時代とも重なっているんですよね。つまり欧米中心だったさまざまな考え方が世界各地の文化に広がっていって、美術そのものを多様に解釈していく必要が出てきたという、そういう時代におけるジェンダーとアートとテクノロジーということなので、今それぞれ発表していただいたことの中で、その60年代90年代と何が大きく変わったのかということを、それぞれちょっとコメントをしていただけますでしょうか。
はい、そうですね。やはり情報がかなり膨張していった時代であって、インターネットもそうなんですけれども、私の方でやはり1989年のベルリンの壁が崩壊というのはすごく大きいと思っていて、あれは情報革命であって、いわゆるラジオ電波を傍受するようなアーティストは結構、旧東欧とか中央の国の方でいらっしゃったんですけれども、そこからテレビの方を傍受したりしてっていうことで、テレビ革命と言われているのがルーマニアの革命ですね。1989年のチャウセスクが落ちてしまったそのことがあったんですけど、この89年以降っていうのがすごくインターネット、そして情報の流動化、そしてさまざまないろんなものが多様性とともに流出していったり相互浸透していった時代だと思うんですね。それとメディアアートのインタラクティブなアートも自分の身体の情報とか環境学を結びついていってしまって、フィードバックを起こすとかということで、やはり境界がだんだん流動してしまったことがあって、それはすごく時代的に大きな違いだと思ってます。
ありがとうございます。
The big difference I see is that the historiography of digital technology and media culture has also have changed because of the introduction of the idea of racialization and the materiality of the technology. I think that the history of digital technology and media culture was mainly led by the West and by a production which was more from white artists, let's say. And I think that now the discussion has also bring to the discussion the contribution and also the issue around racialization. And I think that the last big debate about the raw material, about the bias of technology, about the idea that technology is not colorblind, was something that was not that mainstream at that moment. And even the way that the Cyber Manifesto has been mediatized has put very few emphasis on the contribution of the Africana and the Black feminism corpus, although Donna Haraway underlined it in the Cyber Manifesto. So I think that this is the main change.
I think Yukiko mentioned this already somewhat in her presentation, but a lot of artists in the 80s and 90s were looking towards alternative ways of showing their art, because they didn't come from traditional fine arts background, or it just wasn't space for them to show their art. So like Arya Harvey, who went to Parsons and had design background, Scarnati was also in the design program, and when they got introduced to these computer tools, they realized that what they have been doing in the real world or physical spaces can be manifested in those realms and invite more people to do so. Scarnati and Arya Harvey both said they weren't really actually interested in the traditional art world. They didn't want to show in galleries, they didn't want to show in art museums, because those spaces rejected their work. And so they have found their communities online in that way, and they're able to do whatever they wanted to do. Around the 1990s in the US also was the height of the cultural wars, and also third wave of feminism. So you have like, in the music scene, you have like Riot Girls movement. So this punk anarchist kind of expression was out there and motivating and inspiring. So I think that sort of perception on what women can do really changed the landscape.
I want to go back to you. 一般的なこのサンフランシスコ近代美術館というその美術館と、四方さんが活動されてきたような ICC のようなそのメディアアートに特化したセンターといろいろあると思うんですけれども、アメリカではその、部門別のいくつかの担当の中にそのメディアアート専門のところがあるっていうのも非常に面白いなと思っていて、そうしたことが、その例えばネットアートとかご紹介いただいたそのインターネット上で活動できること、あるいはそれによって美術館に来なくても、民主的にいろんな人にアクセスできるということと、しかもなお美術館がそのネットアートなどを扱って展覧会で展示をすることというのはある意味でコンフリクトがあると思うんですけれども、その点はどのようにお考えですか
？It's sad to say, but a lot of web-based projects that were commissioned in the 90s and early 2000s are dead. Museums actually don't spend a lot of effort reviving them. The exception, like Agent Ruby was an exception. It was built on Flash, and Flash was dead. And we worked with technicians to migrate that work. So there are efforts in keeping certain net art projects alive. But another project that SF MoMA had commissioned of Arya Harvey and Michal Samin's called Eden Garden, that was I think the curator was Benjamin Wild, who commissioned that work. It's no longer accessible, but I think Daria, who will speak in panel, the next panel, who works at ZKM, there's going to be a net art show that will. Arya was telling me that they finally figure out and have a technical wizard who help her revive the plugin for that work. But the time we didn't collect Eden Garden because it was considered ephemeral. These net art projects belonged online and only online. Arya and Michal were invited to show at the Whitney Biennial, and they pulled out last minute because the curators then dictated how they wanted to show that net art project. And so they actually moved the entire project to Postmasters Gallery afterwards, because they can choose how to install that net art project work. So it's the conflict is still there, and I think the museums are educating institutions, so you present net art projects because those are part of art history now, to me at least, or all our fellow members who are interested in time-based media. And so, having like Museum of Moving Image do a whole survey of arias is amazing. Yeah, and I hope we continue to do that.
そうですね、90年代末にその話があって、ICC オープンしたし、ZKM オープンしたんですけど、ネットがアートが出てくると別に美術館いらないんじゃない、箱いらないんじゃないかって話があったんですけれども、その時にZKM ではネットコンディションという展覧会を行って、やはりこう空間でネットアートをしっかり見せるということを90年代末か2000年代初頭ぐらいに行いました。で、私はネットアートはやはり90年代は特に残すというそういったこと自体がインターネット全体でまだ共有されていなかった状況もあったし、ほとんど残っていないんですよね、ネットアート以外も。でもネットアート自体は本当にその時代の環境によって全く変わってくるので、もう機能しないので、それを2010年代とか、あとシュリージェのブランドンもそうなんですけども、また再構築したりすることもあったり、もしくはなんていうかそれを動画で再生するようにすると、もう実際は機能しないし体験はできないけれどもっていうことをやっていると。なので逆に美術館はやはり作品を保管したりケアする場所でもありますので、ネットアートで消えてしまったものでも、もし少しでも再生できたりするものがあれば、そこでしていただいてしっかりと保存していただくことは重要かなと思っているので、ネットアートは本当にパフォーマンスに近い実験であったんですけれども、でも美術館の機能はすごく役割はあると思いますので、そういうことができるなら今であってもぜひやってほしいなと思っております。で、資生堂シグネットの作品も文化庁のアーカイブ関係の研究助成で数年前に一応再構築したんですけど、本当に動画としてしかできなくって、作品自体としてはもう無理なんですよね。でもそういうことをやることは重要だと思ってます。
そのネット上で作品を鑑賞するっていうことと物理的な空間を持つことの矛盾というのは、実はコロナの時に物理的に人を美術館に呼べなくなった時に、どうやってオンラインで作品を鑑賞してもらうのかっていう試みを世界中の美術館がしたんですよね。それでそのことで可能になることと、実際に例えば作品のスケール感がわからないとか、あとはそのサウンドのバイブレーションが伝わってこないとか、それから匂いがしたり素材感がとても重要なものについては、そのあたりはやっぱり実際に見ないとわからないとかというような特徴が見えてきたので、実際今回のマシンラブでは、スケール感を重視するために、作家の数を限定的にしたりとか、それからその映像の中に、描かれているものがリアルライフにもリアルな空間にも出てくるような、その接続点を作るというような、何らかの工夫もしている作品も多いかなというふうに思います。で、もう一つ伺いたいのが男女のデュオ、あるいはそのノンバイナリーのアーティストなどが、紹介していただきましたけれども、そのテクノロジーが、発展することによって、このジェンダーの問題にとってどういう可能性が出てくるのかっていうのはやっぱりもうちょっと伺いたいなと思っていて、で今回のマシンラブでもノンバイナリーのアーティスト何人か入ってるんですけれども、彼らがその自分のアバターを作って作品の中で表現することによって、そこではその現実の世界とは違う、ジェンダーだけではなくてさまざまなその自分を取り囲んでいる、アイデンティティから解放されるような形での表現というのは見られるなと思って、それもまたテクノロジーによって可能になる、興味深い点だなというふうに思って見てたんですけれども、そのテクノロジーによる、フェミニズムあるいはジェンダーの可能性みたいなことについてはどんなふうにお考えですか
So with the impact of the gender on digital art, maybe I will, as you have understood, I'm trying to understand the contribution of Africana and Black feminism to the, and maybe also I will try to answer in this direction. And if I continue about the anthology This Bridge Call My Back and the work of Gloria Andalzois, for instance, the idea was that feminism was wanted to break the barrier and wanted to break the conformity of identity, wanted to show that we can have multiple identity, that we can think in terms of hybridity, we can think in terms of resistance also to the norm, and to invent a new norm, and to write and imagine the mythology that would help us to understand this new form of being to the world. So they were bringing their own history, the long history that they were coming from, and it was a way to, and I think that Donna Haraway understood that it was this possibility that could help to change the consideration we had on technology. So we could take this completely at the margin, this fight, this resistance at the margin of the society. We could bring it in order to better understand what was at stake in technology. So I think that this go back and forth from the margin to the center, from the center to the margin, was a way to maybe understand what is happening to us and how we can read what is at stake in the technology.
Karen, what do you think?
My presentation focused on artists who didn't really think in the non-binary, to be honest. My thesis on femininity was really based on the woman gender. And also both Scout Nati and Arya Harvey and Michal Samin were in hetero relationships. So, but I think thinking back really to Lynn Hirschman Leeson and the idea of the mask, that could carve out what Legacy Russell says in glitch feminism, like these fissures where, you know, your digital self and real life self can have this open space. But you know, Lynn was working, you know, she was in San Francisco Bay Area in the 70s, and feminism in the Bay Area then was second wave of feminism and didn't really think about the non-binary. So that, you know, it would be interesting to think how her concept kind of applies to what feminism is today.
四方さんも何名かそのデュオをご紹介いただいたんですけど、
そうですね、インターネットが出てやっぱりネットアートでなぜデュオが出てきたら本当多いんですよね。で両方とも対等にやってる場合もあるし、役割分担していたり、人によっては男性が強い場合もあるし、女性が強い場合もあるんですけれども、今ふと思ったんですけれども、ネットってやっぱり自宅でできちゃうんですよね。なんか割とやっぱパートナーとかカップルが多いから、なんか自宅でこうキッチンとかリビングで一緒にやってるみたいな感じがしていて、生活の中でアートが発信できるという状況があるのかなと思いました。それぐらい技術が変わってきて、発展したってことと、先ほどお伝えしたように情報の流動性も出てきていて、アイデンティティの流動性も出てきていると。でネットアートの後はやはりソーシャルメディアが出てきて、すごくいろんな形でそれぞれの個人が異なるアイデンティティを使い分けている人も増えましたよね、ここ十数年。ということで抵抗感なくいろんなものに対して挑戦できるようなのが日常になってきたのかなと今思ってます。
実際ソーシャルメディアではいくつかアカウントを持っていて、別のアイデンティティとして発信をしている人たちもいると思うので、そういう意味ではなんかこのジェンダーのイシューについては、私はこのテクノロジーが何かまだよくつかみ取れてないですけれども、何か違う可能性をはらんでるのかなっていう、そういう気はしてますね。いくつか質問を取る時間があると思いますので、会場からご質問のある方いらっしゃいませんか
？Hi, hello. My question is, well, nowadays there's a lot of melancholy regarding all the technology that has been in the 80s and 90s. We can see movements like lo-fi getting bigger and bigger. Do you think there's going to be an evolution towards that, old aesthetic, or do you think we are getting stuck in like a constant loop of we are living in the 90s and today, and then the 2000s, and then the 2030s, and what do you think it's happening exactly on that sense of the melancholy between this transformation of technology nowadays?
Would you want to answer?
じゃあ私からいきますか。そうですね、やっぱり家族主義的な状況がすごく進んできていたので、少しコロナで少しトーンダウンしたと思うんですけど、ここ10年ぐらいそれがあって、それとそれだけではなくて、当然情報の加速化が本当に進んでいる中でローファイとかそういった部分がすごく重要な、避難場とか逃げ道になっているっていうか、ほっとする場所ですよね。温泉行くとかそんなものに近い。あとデジタルデトックスという問題もありますけども、なのでまだ行き場がないんですよね。でそれが別のコミュニティになっているんですけども、これは絶対これからも情報は加速していくし、今の本当に AI とかの、今回のマシンラブ展もそうですけども、いろんな部分ですごく加速するのと、それに対して興味を持たない人も出てくる中で多様化する。その中でやはり老廃とかメランコリー的なものとか、ちょっと今の状況に距離を置くっていうようなこともすごく重要であるし、まだずっとあるのではないかなと思ってます。
現代アートの世界だけを見ると、テクノロジーはおそらく直線的にどんどんエボリューションしていくんだと思うんですけれども、で、今回その最先端を捉えようとする展覧会をやってますけれども、森美術館で同じ年にアフロ民芸というシアスター芸術の展覧会もやっていて、それはアフリカンカルチャーと民芸、その100年前の運動ですけれども、そうした思想がどう生かされるのかということもやっていて、なので陶芸的なもの、あるいは日本古来の書に関するようなことなども今すごく再評価されていて、それから先住民のアートが、各地の先住民のアートが再評価されるようになったことによって、ウィービングとか、それからテキスタイルみたいなものもあらゆる国際展でものすごいたくさん見せられているんですよね。なのでそのアートの定義自体がものすごく拡張しているので、テクノロジーのところだけ見ると、科学的に直線的に進んでいるように見えるかもしれませんけれども、このアートのデフィニッション自体はものすごく拡散しているというか、全方位的に広がっているので、その意味ではなんていうのかな、未来予測がより難しくなっているかもしれませんけれども、近田さんおっしゃるように極めて多様化しているということは言えると思います。
Yes, I think I don't know how to talk about the melancholy, because I think that there is also a trend that brings back things, and especially objects, with this aura of melancholy. But what your question brings to my mind is also that the massification of the internet has been built on the mythology of emancipation. The original discourse we had that technology would emancipate us, would break the barrier, the gender barrier, the geographical barrier, the social barrier, the academic barrier. And we know now that this mythology is no longer relevant. It's no longer, it hasn't give what it was supposed to give. So we know now that internet is a very complex space, energy-driven. And I don't develop all the problems. We all have them in mind. So maybe this willingness to go back in time is maybe the sign that those time was the time of a romantic vision of the internet. And maybe we would like to bring back the potential of emancipation that was in those times.
I'm not sure how to comment on this trend of returning to a certain video aesthetics from the 80s and 90s, but I will give two examples of kind of connected to what Yukiko and Olimata is saying, this return to the physical. And Scavanati has been making projects in cyberspace, but more recently she has returned to beaded work and quilts, which are connected to her indigenous culture in Mohawk. And she explains to me that she titled this series or this initiative of work as Realizing the Virtual. And for her, because she's been always making work about indigenous futures, to create something physical, bring, whether it's a beaded work that she had rendered in Second Life and create that through her hand-making process in the physical world, was bringing the future to now. She wanted to realize the now. Arya Harvey, similarly, she was actually, apart from design, was in sculpture. And so now her work has moved to a different chapter using 3D printing to create 3D printed objects, hence sculpture. And for her, she brings a lot of mythology into her new object-based works, but it's also simultaneously looking back into the past of mythologies, the present with the physical object, and the future of bringing 3D printing technology all together. But the combination of all of that kind of transcends time and space for her. You can sort of impose your ideas of gender, sexuality, and other thoughts into these physical objects. Is kind of amazing.
で私も思うんですけれども、例えば今 AI とかいろんなものが発達してますけれども、今の科学の技術と逆に近代以前のさまざまな英知ですよね。それは陶芸かもしれないし、先住民のいろんな文化的なものかもしれないんですけれども、そういったものを見直していくような時期があって、それがある程度アーティストによって一緒に融合させようという試みも始まっている時代だと思うんですね。これは今やっぱり5年10年ぐらいで始まりつつあるかなと思っていて、逆に最新のテクノロジーとかあと科学は古いものと対立するのではなくて、逆に別の視点から見るとそれは新たな融合ができるのではないかと私は思っていて、そのあたりも含めて考えていきたいなと思っていることと、メランコリーで思い出したのはやっぱりワルター・ベンヤミンなんですよね。ベンヤミンやはり、当時、例えばかなり時代が早く技術も含めて展開する中で歴史の天使ということを言っていて、少し天使はやはり前髪しかないから捕まらないともう行ってしまうという話があってですよね。だからそういうふうに20世紀以降やはり近代技術によってすごくスピードが速くなったがゆえに、それに残されてしまうようなことで、残されてしまったものの方が重要な場合が多いと思われるので、そういったものに対する思いとかメランコリーというか、その思いやりというかベクトルですね、それを持つのはすごい重要だと思っていて、だからメランコリーは考えてみるとすごくクリエイティブなものであって、単純にメランコリーとしてトーンダウンするんじゃなくって、そこからまた次のものを生み出すような、そういった場所になるといいなと思いました。
鹿田さんがおっしゃったことについて、マシンラブの中でもルーヤンとジャコルビ・サッター・ホワイトというアーティストは本当に最新のテクノロジーを使ってはいますけれども、2人とも、1人はチベット仏教、もう1人は、メッタプレイヤーっていうその慈悲の瞑想というところの、思想を伝えたいということで、もう全く古来の、思想を、今の我々に伝えるために最新のテクノロジーを使っているというところもありますし、 し、メソロジーという意味で言えば本当にその、神話的でスピリチュアルな空間を描くために新しい、テクノロジーを使うことの方が、実際その形のない存在しない精神世界みたいなものを表現するのに新しいテクノロジーの方が表現視覚化しやすいというようなこともあって、そういう関係性はいろいろなところで見れるので、それも面白いなと思います。では最初のパネルをこれで終わらせていただきたいと思います。四方さん、カレンさん、アウリマタさん、ありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
はい、では時間になりましたので、パネルディスカッション、2の方、始めさせていただきます。1960年から70年代ニューメディアアートの台頭と女性アーティストたちという、ディスカッションになります。
So as has been mentioned before, this symposium is divided in 3 panels, each of which reflects artistic practices in communication with technological and social developments of specific periods. After the first panel that looked back, that was looking at the movements in the 80s and 90s, we will now go a little bit back and look into the 60s and 70s. That is the period where feminism became strong as a political and social movement and in many parts of the world. And Yukiko Shikata also mentioned that, of course, in each part there has been adaptations and that it was not the same movements everywhere. This is also a period where new media art was driven by technological developments, it has been mentioned, notably in computer systems, in telecommunications, and in video recording. So on the one hand, this period saw a generation of artists that collaborated a lot with scientists, with engineers, with programmers, who had access to computers in industrial, but also in laboratories in public universities. On the other hand, it was a period where we had this video cam very accessible in some parts. The Sony Partapak was launched in Japan in '67, in France too, and in the US it was launched 1 year later. But of course, even this access is not the same in all countries, and we will hear more about this a little bit later. So in both cases, new media were absent from academic training programs and in the established aesthetic history that has been mentioned by Karen in the first panel. And this was an opportunity for women to appropriate them as a new mode of expression and experimentation. They also used them to take control over their own image and question gender stereotypes perpetuated by art history. So in this panel, we will look into different themes, notably into how women experimented and appropriated new media in the 60s and 70s, into the opportunities these media represented, but also the challenges that artists had to face, how they used new technologies to challenge representations of female body and traditional roles, and finally, how present women are in the art historical narratives about new media art of this period. And we have the chance to have 3 speakers from different continents and who will also present about artistic practices in different countries that will allow us to examine regional specificities, but also commonalities and similarities linked to the rise of these new technologies and their use in the artistic fields by women. Our speakers are Daria Mill, curator and research associate at ZKM, Center for Art and Media, Karlsruhe, Germany. Sojung Yi, curator at the National Museum of Modern Art and Contemporary Art, MMCA, Korea. Gabriela Aceves-Sepulveda, associate professor at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology, Simon Fraser University, Canada. I will introduce a little bit more each of them. Daria, as mentioned, is currently at the ZKM. Her research and interests focus on topics related to the intersection of art, science, and technology. She is also particularly interested in experimental practices and the capacity of art institutions to bring about change, to question canons, and employ more sustainable work methods. Sojung Yi is curator at the MMCA. Before she joined the MMCA, she worked for Art Center Nabi and Daejeon Museum of Art. Her main projects include, among others, Transport to Another World, Movement Making Movement, and Sungyun Kim, Lazy Clouds. She will speak more about this artist in her presentation. And since 2020, she worked as the curator for MMCA Film and Video, where she presented screening programs such as Film, Text, and Image on 5 female filmmakers. Gabriela Aceves Sepulveda is an associate professor in the School of Interactive Arts and Technology at Simon Fraser University, as I said, and there she's director of the Critical Media Art Studio and teaches media art production theory and history. Her research on multimedia art practices centers on the histories of women and feminisms at the intersection of art, science, and technology. She is the author of the award-winning book Women Made Visible, Feminist Art and Media in Post-1968 Mexico. So I would now like to give the floor to the first speaker, who is Daria Mil.
Thank you very much, Nina, for this kind introduction, and also thank you very much, Aware and organizers of this conference. I'm very honored to be here and to speak here today. And I will, in my presentation, I will talk a bit about the early time of the EAT and how women participated and what kind of participation was there. So EAT Experiments in Art and Technology. It was a non-profit service organization that was established in 1966 in New York. And their aim was to foster collaborations between artists, engineers, and scientists. At the ZKM, we have a little archive of the AIT, so this was a good occasion for me to go there and to research on the women participating, because as far as I know, there have been no much research on this topic so far. A sheer glance at the archive reveals that there was active participation by women in these organizations. There is no official statistics, so I had to count a bit manually who was there and what was there. Of course, this participation was very limited in comparison to the male participation, but it was much wider in comparison to the mainstream art world. And this may surprise, since the organization was run by males and regarded itself as an engineering society. And engineering at the time was one of the areas with the strongest masculine culture. But I think that the participation of women can be explained by the fact that EAT was founded in the general belief that it would greatly benefit society as a whole. Another drive of it was its experimental character, and also that they valued commitment and collaboration more than a ready product to be sold at the art market. And these two claims, undoubtedly nurtured by idealism and utopic universalism, led to its understanding as a service organization for all members of artistic and engineering communities. The organization was created during preparations for the performance series 9 events, Theatre and Engineering, that took place in October '66. This event was organized upon invitation, and it was to become a constitutive and the first large-scale performance of the group. 10 artists took part, and 3 of them were women, Lucinda Childs, Deborah Hay, and Yvonne Reiner. Here you see Lucinda Childs conversing with Robert Rauschenberg, who was one of the co-founders of EAT, and engineers about advantages of the theater environmental electronic modulator. It was a technical device that was used in the performances. Here you see some slides of performances of Deborah Hay and Yvonne Reiner. All of these female participants were also participants in the Judson Dance Theatre, whereas 3 further male participants, Robert Rauschenberg, Steve Paxton, and Alex Hay, were likewise its members. Judson Dance Theatre, where the postmodern dance took its beginnings and performance of different genders were on equal terms with each other, was remarkable for its spirit of collaboration and experimentation in interdisciplinary performances. And my assumption is that this kind of philosophy influenced very much also the spirit of the early EAT organization. EAT practiced also such inclusive formats as open calls, and in 1967 it organized a competition for the best contribution by an engineer to an artwork, providing support to find partners for all the engineers and artists who wanted to participate. 3 projects out of 9 selected for the final exhibition, that was a historic survey, The Machine as Seen at the End of the Mechanical Age, curated by Pontus Hultén for MoMA, were carried out by women artists. And it was almost as many as in the historical part of the exhibition that included some of 220 works. In parallel to the machine show, EAT decided to organize an exhibition showing almost all of the projects submitted to the competition, thus escaping hierarchies and rules established in the art world. And on the right-hand side, you see the catalog of this second show, Some More Beginnings, Experiments in Art and Technology. It took place in the Brooklyn Museum and included some 27 projects by women artists. They were partly already been working with different technologies and partly they were new to this field. For example, Harriet Kasdan Silva, who took part, was a pioneer in the history of holography. Also, Claire Falkenstein and Alice Simon took part, who were working very strongly with physics, experimental physics, and particle accelerators in case of Alice Simon. Then Alexandra Kasuba, Ruth Franken, and others took place, to name some of them. And Lilian Schwartz's participation in this show was the beginning of her long-term engagement with computer technology. Here you see a page from this catalog that was also very experimentally designed, but not in a very readable way, with 3 works, for example, by female artists, with Alice Simon in the middle, Alexandra Kasuba, and Rachel Bess Cohen. But speaking about Lilian Schwartz, I would like to tell her story of how she came to the computer art through participation in the EAT. At the MoMA exhibit, she showed her kinetic light sculpture Proxima Centauri that you hear on this slide. And it was designed together with the engineer Pierre Bjorn from EAT. This piece was inspired by the space exploration. Schwartz worked in her practice a lot with found materials, and this translucent dome was one of such materials. It was equipped with a pressure-sensitive pad, and as visitors approached and stepped on it, the dome descended back into its black base. Here you see some images that were inside the dome and that were projected on the dome from within. And its interior was stuffed with a projector and slides, a ripple tank, a Singer sewing machine motor, and colored lights. At the opening of the exhibition, Lilian met Leon Harmon, who worked in the field of visual perception at the Bell Laboratories. Bell Labs was at the time the research wing of American Telephone and Telegraph Company in Murray Hill, New Jersey. And Leon was fascinated by her work, and she was very curious about his computer-nude studies in perception #1, of which I would speak a bit later. The work was equally included in this MoMA show, The Machine as Seen at the Age of Mechanical Age. Hamann invited her to tour Bell Labs, and Schwartz ended up staying for more than 3 decades. As an unpaid resident visitor, at first she had to work mainly at night when the computers were not in use. Later she got an employment at the Bell Labs as a graphic consultant. In all, she created 10 computer-animated films using technology created by the engineers of the Bell Labs. This is her first film, dated 1970 and called Pixelation. It combined black and white computer-generated images of the technology by Ken Knowlton. It was Explore program with hand-colored animation and footage of crystal growth. Given the limitations of computers of the time, the process of image generation was very time-consuming and sometimes very frustrating. After several weeks of work, she had only a few seconds of footage, so she found creative ways to meet her deadline. She left the computer and began to paint, inspired by the experimental animated films of Norman McLaren. Also, a mesmerizing soundtrack by Gershon Kingsley, composed on the Moog synthesizer, punctuated every moment, and one's eyes are struggling to keep with the frames, moving colors and rhythms. It's very worth of seeing. The film is online, and I encourage you to have a look afterwards on this film. Today, the film continues to be hailed as a masterwork of experimental film. Through her dialogue with scientists, Lilian Schwartz asked for technologists to realize her ideas and thus push not only her own creativity and boundaries, but also that of the researchers. She pioneered in her career 3D and brought color into and out of a computer, produced art animations with effects, editing and saturation techniques, perspective, and use of the computer to analyze historical questions. Speaking about gender and representation of women in this context, I would like to compare these 2 images. One is the computer nude, Studies in Perception #1, created by Leon Harmon and Ken Knowlton, of which I already spoke. It was in this MoMA machine exhibit. And the second is a computer-generated image by Lilian Schwartz called Big Mama. Even though Schwartz found gender not to be an issue at Bell Labs, the first celebrated computer artwork to be produced there was basically a result of a male-styled bad prank or bad joke, and illustrates the masculinist culture of computer engineering at that time. Ken Knowlton and Leon Harmon created a 180 centimeter long computer-generated mosaic of a nude woman, and as a joke, they hung it on the wall of their boss' office. The boss was not amused at all and asked to hang it down, but sometime later, Robert Rauschenberg used this picture as a backdrop at the press conference of the EAT, and that's how it became popular and was even then reprinted in the New York Times. But what it shows a very traditional representation of a woman body as a reclining nude, and in this odalisque tradition. At the opposite, the image created by Lilian Schwartz, called Big Mama. At the time, she was working at ABM, and it's a computer-generated collage that incorporated examples from the museum's collection. The shape of this woman is greatly in contrast with the reclining nude, of course, and it shows a strong and self-confident woman. It must be said that it was also the original statue by Gaston Lachaise that she used here of a male artist, but still it shows a very confident woman, and woman as an institution full of ideas and of art. And also this homage to the museum illustrated many of the techniques that Schwartz developed with the computer, combining aspect ratios and palettes with texture mapping. The next example I would like to speak to is Carolee Schneemann. And the Technical Services Program that EAT launched in 1967 was its main ongoing activity. It was considered to provide artists with access to new technology and match them with engineers or scientists for one-to-one project-wise collaborations. Carolee Schneemann's remarkable kinetic theater piece and mixed media film performance Snows was the first single artist work to be supported by this program. Though she was also part of the Circle of Judson Theatre, being its co-founder, she believed that EAT supported this work due to its founder's Billy Clover friendship with her partner at that time. It was James Teeney, a composer of experimental music, and Billy Clover worked with him at the Bell Labs. Snows was a protest work addressing the Vietnam War and its atrocities, and it was presented at an Angry Art Week in January and February 1967. The piece combined free-form body movement akin to modern dance with film projections and stage props. Silent, ghostly performance played roles of aggressor and victim, torturer and tortured, as well as simply themselves. And here you see some slides from this piece, and on the left also Shigeko Kubota, who is one of the performers. Several pieces of EAT equipment that had been developed for 9 evenings were provided to the artist, and she got all the support and help from the engineers collaborating with the EAT. For example, an electronic switching system was activated by the audience and controlled elements of the performance, like cameras, sound, and light. As people moved in their seats, the lights overhead were activated and were going on and off, gradually brightening or dimming. Strobes and movie projectors were used throughout the piece, as well as a color organ that was activated either manually or by sounds produced by actors on stage. All audio was controlled by a speaker distribution matrix, which enabled to distribute as many as 20 inputs into any of 20 audio outputs. So it was quite a complex system. And the artist directed the actors not only to follow the script, but also to respond to these technological cues and signals. The technicians and technology were part of the total environment of the work. And this was a moment revealing the agency of human activity, because audience was controlling also the whole environment. And this also brought an element of chance and unpredictability into the piece and broke the rationality of the technology. The piece stands out of the collaborations of EAT due to its political and activistic stance. It expressed critical attitude towards technology as a means of domination, as practiced by the New Left and Herbert Marcuse. But more acutely, it revealed the potential role of technology in social transformation. The artist wanted to break with the understanding of technology as a sleek and autonomous machine. And she considered this connection as dangerous and occurring both in capitalist and fascist societies alike. The artist destabilized the technology and broke its association with perfection. The technological elements were not hidden, and their work was transparent for the audience. And this was part of a common activist strategy to encourage and empower audience members to create their own works of protest, because they could see how it was done. Her feminist critique of technology was both dystopian and utopian. She presented dystopic reality in order to inspire a desire for change. And my third example of collaboration is the work by Marta Minuhin, by the Argentinian artist, in collaboration with Per Bjorn from Bell Labs. The work is called Minofon, and it was created in the same year in 1967. And it was one of the artist's most technically complex pieces. It was a multimedia installation presented in the Howard Weiss Gallery, in which the public participation was key. The public was asked to step into a typical phone booth and to dial a number. And every number dialed triggered a different sequence of events and psychedelic images, like colored water ascending, lights begin flashing, wind blowing and enveloping the participant. Also smoke was made by dry ice, public could take a Polaroid picture of themselves at home, and the conversation was recorded and then played back. So Minuhin criticized here technological consumerism and revealed the alienation of the individual from reality, taking her into a psychedelic trip. The boundaries between private and public dissolve themselves with increasing penetration of technology in everyday life. And here on the image there is a sketch by Marta Minuhin with different effects that she designed for this telephone booth. The outcome of collaborations between women artists and engineers was as diverse and unpredictable as the idea of experimentation itself. All the three examples mentioned above were, though, groundbreaking, related to different fields of media art practices. Carolee Schneemann's mixed media performance stands for activistic and feminist understanding of technology and its use for societal transformation. Marta Minuhin created an example of an interactive installation with the visitor as an active creator. Both artists actively involved public and its agency and exposed it to various technological faults. Lilian Schwartz's computer art stands for early engagement of a whole generation of women artists into computing, whose contributions were unfortunately forgotten or erased. No doubt, EAT managed to facilitate the access of these and other women artists to the technological and engineering know-how. Unfortunately, it was not able to follow up on projects, and the artists involved could not profit from a structural support. And I would like to finish my presentation by this image of the work of Fujiko Nakaya cloud walk at ZKM that she created in 2019 that we showed at the institution I'm working for. Because Nakaya, as it is perhaps also well known, officially basically joined EAT in 1969 and conceived her first folk piece for the Pepsi Pavilion of World Expo in Osaka in 1970 that was commissioned by the EAT. Yeah, so there's the connection to here, to the context. And thank you very much for your attention and listening.
ありがとうございました。では続いて、韓国国立現代美術館のキュレーターのイ・スジュンさんお願いいたします。
Hello, I appreciate to Aware and Mori Art Museum inviting me in this meaningful symposium. My name is Soo Jung-hee, a curator of the National Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, Korea in Seoul. Today, I would like to introduce two Korean artists who inspired art students and audience in 1970s in Korea. They don't know each other, but they have many things in common. Both were born in 1940s and stayed abroad for a long time. Most important thing is they pursue experimental art in their artistic practice. In Korean society in 1970 is under so-called Yushin regime, which began in 1972 by President Park Chung-hee. He took all powers and oppressed the freedom of speech under the strong anti-communism. The first and foremost goal was rapid economic development. Politicians, intellectuals, and journalists who opposed the government were kidnapped, arrested by Korean CIA. The abstract art and art for art's sake was only allowed in those period. When it comes to the film industry, there was strong censorship on films. The filmmakers had to work for the national propaganda films, mainly anti-communism, and also nationalism. Otherwise, there were so-called hostess movies, though there were female filmmakers, producers such as Bang Na-mok and Hong Eun-won, but in most cases, female artists, they don't work in film industry. The hostess movies is like this kind of two famous examples, the hometown of stars and Youngja's heyday. Poor and innocent girl from countryside came to Seoul. First they started work as a factory workers and also maid in a rich family. And they fall in love with some man and they sacrificed everything for the men. And some tragic happens for their lives. They were raped by old men or betrayed by their lovers. So they also sexually exploited, and they became barmaid or prostitute and hostess. So they died in despair. These kind of stories were quite popular those days. And also there was some avant-garde art movement in 1960s and 1970s. Because that time the art academy was quite conservative, so there were some artists and young students who want to do something different. For example, the exhibition Only the Young, it was held in 2023 in Seoul and LA and New York. This exhibition introduced some artists who were very active those period. For example, Murder at the Han River, it was executed by Jeong Kang-ja, another important Korean female artist, and Jeong Chan-seung, the male artist, and they went to Han River and they buried something, and they said it is the death of established authorities. And another example in 1973 was Disappearance Bar by Kang So-ri. He invited people to his opening, and he provided some alcohols and some food, and he asked people to talk together. And today I introduced two artists. The first artist is Sung-gi Kim, and the second one is Oh Ki-han. Sung-gi Kim was born in Buyeo and studied Western painting at Seoul National University. She arrived in France and in 1971 stayed 2 years until in Nice, 1973. And another artist, Oh Ki-han, she is experimental filmmaker and film critic. She studied Ewha Women's University. While working as a journalist for a magazine, she encountered filmmakers and painters and writers of her generation who were trying to rebel against the established culture. She became interested in experimental film and found peers who shared her vision due to the experimental film program of Goethe Institute, or French Alliance Française. Let me introduce Sung-gi Kim in advance. In 1960s, the number of female students in art universities reached twice the number of male students. So even some newspaper, the journalists said, in the near future, Korean art world was conquered by female artists, but that kind of things happened, I think, recently. However, most professors were male under the Yushin regime. The atmosphere of university was conservative. They stick to the national tradition. Sung-gi wasn't interested in the classes. Instead, she studied with calligraphy, Oriental aesthetics with her professor, Song Woo-jeon, and French for her future. She moved to France. Sung-gi studied and passed the examination for a professor and began to work for some art university. And she participated in a lot of projects. This is a short video introduces her activities. Actually, it was originally made by MMC and re-edited by ZKI when it also traveled to Germany. She really involved in a lot of genres, like from calligraphy and video and film. Also, she wanted to make robot, and actually she made it. And she made a lot of video works and video installations and painting, photographs. And this is the one of her important project. We call it Situation Plastic. In 1971 to 1975. But she hardly came back to Korea, and in 1975, she decided to come back to Korea to organize her first solo exhibition. Her solo exhibition was held in U.S. Culture Center in Seoul, and the title is a little bit like unusual at that time. Usually, many people said just like exhibition, but she don't use the word exhibition. She wanted to use art festival. She thought it's more like festival than just one exhibition. The event was 1 week long, but every day she showed some slides and some films to the young students who gathered the place. The problem is it is not allowed by the Korean government to gather young people together, because they thought it's a kind of against the government. So When she had this program, the next day, Korean CIA came to her exhibition space, and they said, "Why do you gather together?" And she answered, "It's just to talk about contemporary art." And also, the police came to the exhibition space. She installed her work titled "소리." It means sound. She installed her installation outside of the exhibition space, but every day the police came and removed her work, and she also next day she installed it again, and it's a kind of like every day she repeated those kind of installation and deinstallation. And when she had this Sungi Kim Art Festival, many young Korean students were quite shocked. For example, Professor Lee Wong-gun, who became media theorist and media artist later, he was attended Seoul National University, of the same university she attended. When he came to the art festival, he thought Sungi showed a new area of art, and they also his colleagues, his friends were so impressed the new area of media and film. In this stage, she was a professor. She said she spent a lot of her money to make new film and new video artwork. And the second project she did in Korea is Space Time, 1975. At that time, it was rare for visual art to collaborate with other artists in 1970s in Korea. When Sungi Kim began her activity as an artist, she wanted to interest in exchange with the diverse areas of experimentation from early on. In today's term, she was a pioneer of Korean interdisciplinary art program. In 1975, there was an event organized by one magazine in Korea. We call it Space. Space, and they had 100 issues, and they invited artists to organize some new type of art festival. Composer Kang Seok-ki and avant-garde dancer Hong Shin-ja participated as a co-producer. Sungi organized and executed a performance called Space Time. To this end, she made drawings recorded acts of participating performers, such as walking and jumping, to form a sort of choreography. This is some newspaper about the festival. You can find many names like Namjoon Baek, also Isadora Duncan and Joji Yuasa. And Sungi and her colleagues want to do something they never executed in Korea. After that, she replayed this performance in 2008, Space Time 2008. In Art Platform Art Sonje Center, and the artist Space Time 2019 was performed on September 8, 2019, and her solo exhibition in MMCA Seoul. You can see the small robot next to her. She always wants to make robot who plays, who doesn't walk, and she collaborated with young media artists to make this robot called Young-hee. Sungi Kim hardly came back to Seoul in 1980s. Since the 1990s, she presented her works to the exhibition in Seoul. However, it was not easy to have her exhibition in Seoul due to the lack of understanding of her art. She exhibited her works at Gwangju Biennial and Media City Seoul. After MMCA Seoul opened in 2013, she could have shown her works to the audience. One group exhibition titled Infinite Challenge. It's about Asian new media art pioneers, along with Nalini Malani and Shuriel Chang and Xiaojia Shikando. In 2019, her retrospective, Rage Cloud, gathered attention by audience and many young artists. Next, I want to talk about Han Ok-hee. Sungi Kim has been working in visual art scene. Ok-hee Han has been in film scene. She formed an experimental film group with her friends or peers, and it is called Kaido Club. The meaning of Kaido, actually, Kaido is the name of father, Mongolian princess Kutulon. But Ok-hee and her colleagues thought they thought Kaido is the name of the Mongolian warrior princess. And they named their group they want to like Mongolian woman warriors, they want to fight with the established society. It is the manifesto written by Oki. There is no woman in Korean films, no matter how much. Kyunga is one of the heroine from Hostess movie, tries to coquette that she is the lost dream woman of our time. There are no women in Korean films, even if Youngja is also the heroine of Hostess film, is praising her heyday. There are no women in Korean films. As far as I remember, the person who censored the omnibus film of female, ordered that the title be changed because it would become sly. There are no women in Korean film. It is the conception of Oki and her colleagues. And in their manifesto, they said they want to fight with prejudice. The filmmaking is a man's job, and they want to also fight with the prejudice. The film was tied inextricably to its commercial success. So they want to film not just for money, to express their own artistic intention. Han was against the patriarchal film industry in Korea and wanted to promote creation of experimental films by women. She showed her 60mm experimental film based on performance, The Hole 1973, The Middle Dog's Day in 1974, and The Loaf in 1974 in this festival. And when they had this performance, there are a lot of feedback from the newspapers and also some magazines. Kaido Club's practice was very sensational because it was the first experimental film club. There was some research groups such as Cine Poem led by director Yoo Hyun-mok and Seogang Video Research Association, but these groups were for the research and appreciation of new film. However, Kaido Club pursued to create new experimental films by themselves, and also they announced their purpose is to create experimental film. You can see the director was nude and the actress is dressed. So, and so it is. You can see it here. There is a film directors and the actress. And they also organized a film symposium in 1975 at the United States Information Center in Seoul, where Sungi Kim Art Festival was held. You can see the members of the Kaido Club. They were mainly in their 20s. And the symposium, the content of the symposium is like this. Professor Lee Eryong presented woman's image in literature and film, its light and shadow. And film critic Byun-in-sik, is it possible to expand women to participate in film art? And the last part is, I think, quite important. Film directors Hong Eun-won and Bang Nam-ok, they talk about the situation of a woman in Korean film industry. Hong Eun-won was film director who made the one lot of film, and one of the most famous one is Female Judge. And Bang Nam-ok, she is also Korean film director. They made a lot of film about the females were the main lead. For example, Nam-ok, she in this cover, she is the director. She went to film productions with her baby on her back. And the whole is a kind of serial film made by Oki Han. And the loaf depicts of the image of a dog being dragged away on a hot day. And also the other work of The Color of Korea, Setdong, it is about Korean national tradition, the colors and patterns, but it is a little bit different from she wants to do something new with traditionalism. And this film was not shown in via Kaido Club. It will showed later, but it is one of the most important films made by Oki Han, untitled 77A. The film contains the despair of an artist's desire for creation, on ruthless censorship, rebellion, and anxiety in the mid-70s. One woman went out to the streets of Seoul and shot passers-by with her Wade Bullocks camera. After a day's outing, she fell into ecstasy, dancing with the celluloid in the editing room, and cut reality into pieces of film with her sharp scissors. And this film is about censorship. This film is about censorship because there are strong censorship. At the end of the film, the filmmaker Oki appeared and she cut the final cut even. Hanuki went to Germany to study film when Kaido Club was dismissed and come back to Korea in the late 1980s. She has been working as a film director and also film critic until now. Her recent work is more like national propaganda. It's not national propaganda, but she wants to do something to promote Korean culture, unlike the other national propaganda film in 1970s. So she made one film, Learning Korean, for Korean Expo in Daejeon in 1993. And she still currently very actively working as film critic. Her films were introduced in 2004 Seoul International Film Festival as one of the first independent film directors, along with Lee Tae and Lee Gong-hee. Her films were revisited due to the increasing interest in the female film, including Jeonju Film Festival, I Am Independent section, and Harvard Film Archive, and also very important exhibition, Feminist World Making and the Moving Image, created by Erika Barsom. And these days in Korea, art history students or film history students wrote a dissertation or article on Sung-gi Kim and also Oh Ki-han. Sung-gi Kim also never defined herself as a media artist or never defined herself as feminist artist. Later, she had the word to put woman in front of her name because in 1970s, even in the newspaper, they described her female artist, female painter from France, debuted in Korean art scene or something. So she doesn't want to put female in front of her always. But ironically, many young female artists, they got inspiration from her and they want to follow her way as an artist. And thank you for listening. This is my presentation.
はい、では続いて、ガブリエラさんお願いいたします。サイモン・フレーザー大学の、インタラクティブアートテクノロジー学部の准教授をされているガブリエラ・アセベス・セパルベタさん、よろしくお願いします。
Hello, thank you all for being here. Thank you especially to Aware, Nina and Misuo and the Mori Art Museum and everyone who made the symposium possible. And also thank you for waiting for me because my plane was delayed. So my apologies to my panelists. So today I want to take a cue from Shigeko Kubota's thoughts on how the videotape, quote, acts as an extension of the brain's memory cells, end quote, which inspires the title for this gathering, Living with Two Brains. So my talk today will focus specifically on Latin American women artists who used video and other imaging technologies in the early 70s and shared Kubota's views on the potentials of video as a mnemonic device and as an expressive tool that allowed explorations of different feminine subjectivities. Like Shigeko Kubota, who fused a range of artistic genres and developed her own categories to understand her media productions, such as her creation of video sculptures or video diaries, and most importantly, created an embodied relation to the video camera by conceptualizing it as an extension of her body, a prosthetic for a mother-daughter relation, a substitute for a sexual partner, and a means to claim self-sufficiency. Sometimes in parallel and at times earlier than Kubota, the artists that I will be talking about today also develop unique engagements with technology, creating a one-of-a-kind audiovisual language, and explore the possibilities and limitations of this audiovisual language also by challenging representations of femininity while simultaneously reinscribing the female body as a site of violence and political potential in response to their local and regional sociopolitical environments, and in the particular reemergence of feminist discourses and political movements of the second wave. So as I will discuss, Latin American women artists produce innovative artworks, and they facilitated access and fostered experiments with these emergent technologies in various capacities, thus becoming key actors and catalysts in developing new media art in the region and also globally. So we all know that dominant histories of video art tend to highlight the male artists who were involved in their invention. As we know, the introduction of the portable video camera recorder to consumer markets, most well known as the Portapac, occurred alongside the international reappearance of feminisms as a political movement and in public discourse in the early 70s. This convergence made video one of the most sought-after means of expression for women artists who were marginalized by dominant modes of media production and political representation, and by the structures of patriarchal structures of the art world. So the portable video camera facilitated the exploration of the intimate and the domestic, while the videotape provided a wide range of options for independent distribution and circulation of video-based projects that gave women greater voice and presence in the visual arts and mass media, as we have just seen with many examples. So video's immediacy and confrontational nature empowered these artists to challenge media representations of the female body, female sexuality, and cultural stereotypes, thus potentially transforming fixed notions of class, gender, and ethnicity. Furthermore, the medium's newness and resulting lack of history afforded women artists more agency to determine their use and relationship to video. And this allowed many to develop and, as I said, theorize an embodied relation to technology, and with their Portapacs that actually challenged the dominant gendering of technology as a male domain. So in the 1970s, video technology in Latin America was scarce and expensive. Only artists with economic means and the right connections could afford to experiment with such technology. Many Portapacs were brought to the region via individual artists, such as the Portapac brought to Brazil by artist John Azoulay, which was used and shared by Anabela Geiger, Leticia Parente, and Sonia Andrade. In some areas, the television industry, which was increasingly adopting video technology in live broadcasts, played a crucial role also in providing access to video technology for artistic experimentation. Televisa in Mexico or TV Globo in Brazil would become two of the largest broadcasting companies in the region and wielding significant political power. And like elsewhere, many artists in the region experimented with emergent televisual broadcasting technologies, including closed-circuit television, live feedback, time delays, and so on, to question the art establishment and comment on the influence of mass media in the public domain. Important examples of these practices were developed at the Instituto Torcuato Di Tella in Buenos Aires, Argentina, where as early as 1966, Roberto Jacobi popularized the concept of mass media, and artists such as Margarita Pasca and Marta Minujín, which we already listened a little bit about, experimented with video and broadcasting technology. So today I will focus my presentation on the work of Argentinian Marta Minujín, Mexican Paula Weiss, and Colombian Sandra Llanos Mejia, all of whom developed distinctive engagements with self and technology and challenged dominant perceptions about the gendering of technology as an exclusive masculine domain. These artists transitioned from traditional artistic formats to experiments with performance, happenings, installations, closed-circuit television, the use of computer and other electronic images, leading to some of the most experimental engagements with videography, parallel to those developed by Shigeko Kubota and others. So, supported by the Instituto Torcuato Di Tella and various national and international fellowships that allowed her to freely traverse and influence dominant international networks of the post-war avant-garde, Argentinian Marta Minujín began experimenting with closed-circuit television in the 60s, after producing a series of immersive sculptures and actions with multicolor matrices that propose a tactile, affective, and sexual relation with the television screen. Minujín developed complex environments that proposed an intersubjective engagement between the viewer and the object. This led her to reconfigure normative relations of spectatorship and insist on affective and embodied relation between viewer and the screen. She directed her interest to how subjects were exposed to mass media and the dichotomies between mediation and liveness produced by the broadcasting technology. This interest in producing excessively sensorial and emotional collective experiences spoke to a feminist sensibility that sought to make the intimate public and break with the media border that separated the real from the mediated experience. For instance, using closed-circuit television systems in La Menezunda, which was a large installation with various rooms with different things in each room, Minujín transgressed the subject of a relationship by allowing the viewer to see and be seen. For example, some of the rooms you could look to what was happening in another room through a peephole, or in this case, it was full of mirrors or had neon lights. And then following La Menezunda, Minujín created Simultaneidad en Simultaneidad, or Simultaneity in Simultaneity, in 1966, known as the first transcontinental happening, organized in 2 different days and 7 days apart in collaboration with Alan Capro, who was based in New York, and Wolf Bostel, who was based in Berlin. The purpose of this happening was to explore the emission and transmission of information through video, radio broadcasting, photography, telegrams, and telephones between the 3 cities. That is New York, Berlin, and Buenos Aires. But just as Daria already mentioned, it is perhaps through the creation of Minophone from 1967, that was part of the EAT, an immersive and interactive phone booth where you could watch yourself on a television screen as you make a phone call, and also the parallel Minocode from 1968, which was a social environment consisting of filming separate health parties in different places in New York, through which Minujín also begins to blur the line between herself and the technology, because she started developing a trademark that combined the word code and phone with her last name, Minujín, to connect the technology to herself in a more intimate way. So moving on, and much like Minujín moved to combine herself with her work, and Kubota's development of genres and intimate relation with her camera, the Mexican Paula Weiss also proposed different fusions of self and technology through experimentations across narrative genres, which led her to develop hybrid forms and categories that resisted any established framework and declared her independence as a video producer. In Mexico, Paula Weiss began to collaborate with both state and private television in '74, and soon after she declared herself to be a teleasta, a producer of televisual images. At a moment when Mexican intellectuals and politicians debated the content of television programming and the management of broadcasting, Paula Weiss advocated for video as a tool to explore audiovisual production as a valid form of intellectual activity akin to writing. She established ArtTV, her own production company, in 1978, and until she took her own life in 1990, Weiss produced a series of television programs and videos to develop an alternative to commercial television and foster active and critical viewers. Combining the predominant articulation of video art as a medium of self-knowledge with a concern for exploring video's relation to television broadcasting and the media's aesthetic technical qualities, she incorporated live feedback, experimented with multiple cameras, and mirrors to break the media border to create the different television realities where pairings of self and other shifted and alternated. For example, here in her video danzas or video dance performances, which consisted of live events in public spaces in which she combined performance and video, Weiss transformed her video camera into an eye or a limb as she danced with it in her hand, filming her movements, effectively transforming her portapac into a prosthetic through which to explore and push the limits of bodily experiences. During these video dances, her camera broadcasted her movements through video signals transmitted to monitors and reflected through mirrors. So by merging her body with that of the spectator, Weiss transformed not only the subject-object relation in the matrix of representation, but produced an unconventional television reality in which couplings and self and other could shift and alternate. So like Kubota, Paula Weiss took her embodied relation with her camera and video practice to an extreme by intimately fusing herself with her practice. Echoing Kubota's video poem, quote, "Video is vengeance of vagina," end quote, Weiss conceptualized the creation of each of her videos as an act of giving birth, or an alumbramiento in Spanish. She named her camera as her escuincla, which comes from the Nahuatl word for daughter or small child, and her vagina as the site of video production, metaphorically transforming her creative process into an act of incestuous copulation with her escuincla, or her video camera. In doing so, she not only declared her self-sufficiency as a female video producer, taking ownership of both being the inspiration and the author of all stages of production, but she also gendered all aspects of the video as female. Through playful neologisms and metaphors, she also extended her position to an active role in the process of breaking the alienation of viewers. She conceived herself as an audiovisual guide, a Venusina, a goddess from Venus, whose mission was to extrapolate or make the viewer see images, interpolar or interpolate or interrupt the viewer to disrupt the narrative, to make active viewers, and to polarize or invite the viewer to reflect on what he or she saw. Like Minuhin and Weiss, Weiss was aware of the value that the circulation of images could bring to her name, and not only fuse her name with her artwork, but with her own production company, and gave it an utopian goal. For Weiss, ArtTV was a tool that will shape a new man, a new kind of human being, a cosmic man, as she called it, one that it was in touch with their feelings, and the portable video camera would allow everyone to become a producer. Like Kubota, Weiss believed in the mnemonic capacities of video. In her bachelor thesis, which was the first thesis produced in video in Mexico, she affirmed her belief that in the near future, everyone would own personal libraries and collections of self-video recordings. So Kubota and Weiss met in Mexico City in 1975 in the context of the first International Women's Conference by the UN. And in the video recorded interview of this meeting, Weiss and Kubota discussed their approaches to video art, agreeing that video consists of distorting images, creating interruptions and feedback loops. Both artists continued to be in touch via postmail throughout the 70s, and then Weiss became a university professor, a mentor, and a role model for the second generation of video artists who would continue to push boundaries of the media border and the relation between self and technology. And so the last artist that I want to mention today is the Colombian-born Sandra Llano Mejia, who also produced innovative work in Mexico and in the US between the 1970s and the 1980s. In her case, through an exploration of different modes of perception and cognition based on the registers of biofeedback technology and video. So Sandra Llano Mejia was a student in Mexico City where, in the 70s, where she began to produce a series of graphics using electrocardiograms and encephalograms to translate the pulsations and biological registers of her body, her heart, her breath, and her brain waves. These experiments will form the basis of her thesis to obtain a degree in visual arts, and later will be part of the exhibition of Life Energy and Other Emotions, Electrical Registers of Life and Death from 1976 and 1977. This exhibition was influenced by her readings on cybernetics, logic, and psychoanalysis, and also through an exposure to international trends of conceptual art. So Llano Mejia believed that we had entered at a time of machines, and that neither drawing nor painting were expressions of our current reality. Rather than focusing on developing hand-eye-pencil coordination, in her drawings, with this early graphic work, she demonstrated the possibility of producing aesthetically pleasing images by manipulating her heart, breath, and brain waves to translate the vital energy and the emotions that drove her desire to create using the tools of her time. This interest on perception, vital energy, and technology will continue to drive her artistic production and would lead her to further experiments with sound, video, and performance. In the late 70s, she began producing collaborative events that showcase a series of video installations and happenings, experimenting as well with closed circuit television and mirrors to invite viewers' participation. And with these works, Llano Mejia and her collaborators were interested in creating environments to observe participants. So this approach was more linked to science, which would become a constant in Llano Mejia's provocative melding of science, art, and technology, which would lead her to the pioneering use of biofeedback technology in the region, like in her participatory installation Impulse, which we are seeing parts of it, in which the artist recorded the heartbeats of the people who attended her exhibition. She also produced other types of work or piano performances like música intimada or piano experimental, in which a pianist interpreted Llano Mejia's waves, brainwaves, as musical notations. Like for Weiss and Minujín, video technology was for Llano Mejia a tool that allowed her to experiment with new languages. And like them, through her practice, she also theorized and speculated about new relations between self and technology and transformations on modes of perception and cognition. This interest is also reflected in this piece from 1989 called Video Book, an installation with 2 television monitors without casings that lay adjacent to each other like 2 pages of an open book. The monitors showed video recordings of close-up portraits of the artist and a series of layered images including poems written by the artist with distorted visual effects, accompanying with self-reflective monologues by the artist and sounds of nature. This work reflects Llano Mejia's interest in books and her own conjectures on what an audiovisual book could look like in the future. So in conclusion, the affordances of video technology allow these 3 artists to voice their construction of a fractured and embodied subjectivity, which is always in the process of becoming, and that destabilizes a fixed notion of the self. This is most clearly seen in Weiss' attempts to break with the subject-object position using live feedback and monitors, as well as dance, in Minuhin's experiments with telematics, or in Llano Mejia's attempts at visualizing vital energy and emotion through biofeedback technology and closed-circuit television. These artists imagined an embodied perception and saw the potential to express it via new technology. In doing so, they speak to a feminist sensibility that questioned those who had the power to define the knowable and the sensible. Through their practices, tacitly or actively, they open spaces for other female artists to produce videos, experiment with new technology, and potentially serve as role models. By proposing diverse relations between self and technology and producing alternative representations of the female body, they constructed also new audiovisual languages and practices through which other ways of being and politics could be imagined in their local context. So, thank you.
ありがとうございました。では、ここから、パネルディスカッションに入りたいと思いますので、登壇者の、方、ダリアさん、スンチュさん、壇上の方にお上がりください。
So, we will have a small time for moderation because it was so interesting that we are a bit late, but I want to thank you, the 3 of you, for these super interesting talks. Maybe as a sort of conclusion before I ask you questions, I'm struck by the fact that within that history where men were supposed to be key actors and catalysts of avant-garde, it seems like female artists were really the one at the center. Not only they were able to delve into abstraction, but also in mathematics, became engineer, science, computing. They were able to delve into interdisciplinarity very early on. They also invented interactivity and the importance of the viewer. They moved into new technology, whereas photography, then video art, then experimental film, then computing, and finally artificial intelligence. These new techniques also involved old techniques such as sound, music, but also a new object such as performance, choreography, which implied the importance of the body. Then they also invented machine use, installation, collaborative practices. But within that history of collaboration, they were somehow lost. So my first question to all of you is, how difficult was it for you to delve into the archive to reconstruct their history? So first of all, maybe Daria, because you're delved into the archives of EAT.
I think the problem is that there is not so much information available on these artists, and if they are coming from Argentina or other contexts, also I think about Marta Minuhin, there is no publication in English available at the moment, and the archives have been, there is something, but very sparse information. I found one book on Minuphone that I had to order via interlibrary exchange. So there is whole logistics also of information connected to this. And I think that it's very important to have really basic also information available about these artists available online. That's why AWARE is also so important to start to also to realize what was their contribution to art history and to the discourse.
Thank you. Maybe Sujun, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I want to talk about Sungi Kim's case. She started her artistic career in 1960s and 1970s, 1980s. She continued to work. She produced a lot of works by herself, but actually it was, in a way, not commercial. So she had all her works in her own house, suburb of Paris, and she also tried to collect old materials, and now actually she has many archives in her own house, but never been shown to the public. So when I prepared her exhibition in 2019, we went to her house, and I and my colleague went to her home and tried to find all sketchbook, all the papers, and still there are a lot of video promise from the early period to until now. She said when she first made the situation plastic, the video projection outside in beach, and in that case she borrowed very expensive film camera for broadcasting, which was used in TV, and she tried to experiment all new mediums, new camera, new types of medium. So in her house, I found it's always the history of mediums. And then she said she wanted to find some place to donate those archive, the mediums of herself. And she talked to our museum, and we don't have much technician like that kind. So it is really important to host some archive. The institution have to be prepared. So in a way, it is lucky she hadn't been sold a lot of works until now, so we had most of her works as original form in her house. But and then after our exhibition, she donated a lot of videos to our museum. So now we have many of her archives and try to be researched in the future as well.
Thank you, Sujun. Then Gabriela, how would you answer that question of the difficulty of archiving?
Oh, it's always been a difficult question, but so I began researching, working with these women maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and I've seen the difference. So when I started researching Paula Weiss, her archive was being finally transferred from a person who was in charge into an institution. So I saw it before it was cataloged when I did my research. But it's been a whole process where you have with the people who are in charge of this archive to find an institution, to digitize the videos, to make sure that it's accessible in different platforms, and to catalog, and to have the commitment of an institution, which is the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo in Mexico, who holds the archive now. But it was a really long process. In the case of Sandra Llano Mejia, she's still alive and she has all her material in her house. So we need institutions that commit to maintaining and providing access. And in the case of Marta Minuhin, she's still alive and she is able to provide some materials, but she's also, her materials are scattered everywhere, and there is a need for an institution as well. But I do see that there's been a change, and many of these women have to advocate for themselves. Which is really important. But also is our role as historians and artists in not reproducing the same narratives about art and making sure those connections. I was just amazed of looking at the connections between all the artists that were shown, and those connections are never made, and they were happening simultaneously. So.
Thank you very much. And it is actually the goal of AWARE as archive, to bring this information, disseminate, and create a new narrative. And so my second question is linked to what you just said, Gabriela. In order to create that narrative, we have to go back into these political years of the 60s and 70s, where this first or second wave of feminism. How do you think these artists of that generation relate to today's feminism? How different was the feminism then, sometimes confronted to censorship, to violent repression? How is it shaped? Is it so different than today's feminism, or a bit the same? Maybe Gabriela.
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, but it depends on the context. So I would say that in Mexico is the context that I'm more aware. For example, during the second wave in the 70s, many of the feminist activists did not consider art to be a matter of politics, even though the political history of art in Mexico. So feminists were a bit of outsiders, even though they were doing a lot of feminist work. In the 80s, this was a bit more recognized. In the 90s, it was not recognized. And so since the emergence, due to the violence against women in Mexico, there's a lot of interest in looking back at the women who were active in the 70s. And there's kind of like a re-recognition. But I think that, as Daria and So-Young also mentioned, many of these artists from the 70s, even though they were dealing with feminist sensibilities and they were representing some feminist issues, they would not consider themselves as feminist. So there's always that tension, and there's different ways of understanding feminism. That's why I like to use the word in the plural, but it depends on the context and in the way that the politics is lived in that context.
Yes. Sungi, in the case of Sungi Kim, she never wanted to add female in her name because in the Korean art scene, when we call someone a female artist, we say in Yoryu, like woman artist, it is treated as like that professional sometimes. It has some meaning. The female artist more like hobby, doing art for her hobby, not for her profession. So she doesn't want to do this concept, I think. But in the case of Oki-han, she studied at Ewha University. It is very important university, woman university in Korea, where feminism is so strong. And she and her colleague in Kaido Club, they studied feminism, and they are really aware they have to fight with the male-dominated society, as in the manifesto of Kaido Club. So those are like similar ages, but they were in different positions, I think.
I think that examples that I mentioned, the positions, they were not explicitly feministic, but already working, I think, also in the masculine context. It was already a very strong position that you had to take, I think. Though also Lilian Schwartz, she said even that she felt, for example, more at ease at the Bell Labs in this atmosphere rather than in the traditional art world, because there she faced much more restrictions and limitations, and people at the Bell Lab, they were more open to the ideas and to this exchange. And during the preparation of my research article and of the presentation, I also spoke to Julie Martin, who was the one of the organizers also of EAT, and she said, of course, the feministic agenda was not at all in the organization, or it was also somehow parallel a bit, or the second wave of feminism was like late like 60s and 70s, but it was not on their agenda, but somehow they involved women artists because of their experimental character. But I think that the change or the difference to today's, perhaps that is more accepted, the position, and as we did a show with Ulrike Rosenbach, she also gave a talk and she said it was so stressful because like every decade you had to do things again, you had to show again your position, you had to repeat everything because she had an impression that everything had been erased and then she had to start anew to show her work, to position herself and to do this work again. And I think today it is much more accepted, and in the today art world, especially after the pandemics, the feministic topics of care, of responsibility for humans, for environment, it's very much stronger than it was before. Perhaps also some people don't know that it comes from this feministic background, but it's now becoming mainstream, I would say.
Well, that's a very optimistic sentence. I would love to conclude the event with that, but I still want to have a bit of time to open up questions to the room. We can be, I think, 5 minutes late, so do you want to ask questions to our wonderful colleagues?
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to ask regarding, you know, the most recent feminist wave in Korea. When you were looking at the archives and you were like collecting all the information, how did you feel like seeing, you know, like connecting, oh, this happened, you know, in the past time, and then you connect all the dots and it's like, oh yeah, now this relates to this and this and this. How was that feeling of getting to understand better certain things that are happening today that had their roots back in on that era?
I think they already existed, not only for the case of feminist female artist activities. Actually, experimental art was not discovered until recently. So most of the most of experimental art movement by female artists, by male artists as well, were under-evaluated until recently. So nowadays we try to access those trends. For example, in the case of Onni Young exhibition, it was about experimental film art exhibition. Most of the artists were almost male artists. Only one writer of the catalog, Jo Wen-gi, she mentioned there were activist group called Takkaido Club. So I discovered via her text. So then there was some like text about some program about her works in independent film festival. But from our side, from the museum part, we never thought they were those kind of experimental art movement. But so not only from the feminism approach, it is more like we want to have more research on experimental scene. That's why we can access those areas. Maybe in Korea, we have a lot of feminism exhibition now. We have, even in our museum, we have a Connecting Bodies exhibition. It's about Asian women artist exhibition. And some people already complain there are too many women artist exhibition. But it is because we are very familiar with another trend, like a lot of abstract painting or a lot of like more art for art's sake. So this is the like transition of our trends in Korea. And I maybe in the few years, maybe the other things happens, like drawing or calligraphy, other things happens. But now, I'm sure in 10 years and 20 years ago, I thought there are only a few media artists, few female artists. There are really few women media artists, but now there is in Korea a lot of like talented young female artists in this area, and also all other areas, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've reached our time limit. I wanted to thank you all for your interest, patience. Arigatou gozaimasu, and I'll see you tomorrow for the third chapter.